room?
No, not at the moment.
All right.
So
Yeah,
there
then
we go. The meeting is started.
Yeah, we need a motion to enter closed session to obtain legal advice on a legal matter, namely the application of the town code to a pending building permit application. General provisions, Article 3 through 57. Someone could say so moved.
So moved.
All right.
All in favor?
All right.
All right, close.
Okay. I'm sorry. And you just missed it, but we just had a motion to enter closed session. So I'm actually going to put you back in the waiting room for the time being.
No problem.
Thanks for joining.
And Matt, if you could also.
And admit.
Well, I never had a chance to say anything or ask any questions, but I was.
Well, can we, before we do that, can we give Steve a chance?
Recording is back on, and I am now admitting everyone into our meeting.
So I take it that you opened the meeting and
The meeting was opened at
And then you voted to
4:45
go.
and we entered into closed session.
okay, thank you. I apologize to everyone who's here that I had misplaced my cell phone, and you know what a crisis that is. So now I will reconvene the meeting, and the first item, and I assume that the town manager has read the disclaimer.
I have not yet, no.
Oh, yes, could you please read the disclaimer?
Sure. This is just a reminder to everyone that this meeting is being recorded, so we'll post it on the town website after the fact. We ask that if you have any questions or comments during public comments section, that you please use the raise hand function if it's available to you, or you can also send me a direct message in the chat function of Zoom, and we'll try to call on folks in the order that they do raise their hand or send a message. If for whatever reason this meeting gets interrupted in a way that's disruptive and that it can't continue, we will immediately close it and send out information about reconvening and reconvene right away for us. Turn it back over to you, Mr. Mayor.
And also, we ask that the participants identify themselves in the Zoom. So do you want to, because since this is a recorded hearing,
Yes.
so similar to when we had the sign in, when we were live. So I think there are a few numbers that need to be identified.
Yes, I'll reach out to folks and make sure that I have the correct information.
Okay, you'll be able to do that while we're going through the
Yep.
meeting. Is that right? Okay, thank you. And I would like to thank all the participants for their cooperation in identifying themselves for the record. So the first item is public hearing motion to consider approval of a 3-month extension through July 13th, 2021 to the open building construction permit granted to Brett and Heidi Schroeder at the property located at 4712 Essex Avenue for the ongoing new building construction. Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, I believe we have our building administrator, Doug Lohmeyer, here as well. So Doug, I am happy to turn it over to you if you want to make your recommendation for the extension request for 4712 Essex.
Good evening. The applicant has requested an extension for the building permit, and they've stated that there are several exterior items that need to be completed and some interior work that also needs to be done. And the town cannot release their building permit until the county finals their building permit. So I'm recommending that the council approve a 3-month extension on the building permit until July 31st.
Okay, that completes your report, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to comment on the staff report?
Yeah, this is Brett Schroeder. Yeah, I would,
Welcome. Welcome.
yeah, thank you.
Go forward.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we'll actually need the whole 3 months. We're almost complete. We have a few remaining things, as Doug indicated, primarily installation of some rear steps, a new fence, planting of trees and plants, and final grading of the yard. So I think it could be done quicker, but some of it depends on weather, of course, which is getting better and better. So we're very close. And so, yeah, we appreciate getting the extension.
Thank you very much. Council President Shaw, do you have any questions?
Just one question. Are we looking at July 13th, which is what's in the printed document? I thought I heard Doug say July 31st. So I just want to make sure we've got the right date for the extension.
The current building permit expires on April 13th. And so the 3-month
13th.
extension would be through July 13th.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Council Member Zoidhauser.
Yeah, Doug, if you could just refresh my memory, please. Is this the first extension?
Yes, this is the first extension for this property.
Great, thank you so much. No other questions.
Thank you. Council Member Peel.
I don't have any questions on this one.
Thank you. Council Member Circo.
No questions.
Thank you. Council Member Barr.
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Town Manager, has any resident or guest indicated an interest in speaking on this agenda item?
No, not at this time, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Council, are you therefore prepared to make a motion?
Move that the council approve a 3-month extension through July 13th, 2021 to the open building construction permit granted to Brett and Heidi Schroeder at the property located at 4712 Essex Avenue.
Is there a second? I see Zoidhauser. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Schroeder. The next item is public hearing motion to consider approval of a 3-month extension through July 27th, 2021 to the open building construction permit granted to Megan Spilasi at the property located at 5508 Uppingham Street for the ongoing new building construction. Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, this would be the second building permit extension for this property. I will turn it over to our building administrator, Doug Lohmeyer, for his report. Doug, you are muted. I don't know if you are speaking or not.
The applicant stated there's several interior items that are on back order, and they plan on completing the landscaping and the installation of the new driveway apron sometime in May. So I'm recommending that the council approve a 3-month extension until July 27th.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present and wish to comment on the staff report?
I believe we have the builder here, Michael Banks.
Yes, hi. Michael Banks here. I'm representing Megan Spilasi, and I believe our permit ends on April 22nd. And I think we'll need about a month to complete some of the exterior items, which is landscape install, driveway. And then interior wise, we have some appliances and countertops and fixtures we're waiting on. So we're very close, and we're excited to almost be done over there. So
Thank you for joining us tonight. Council
Sure.
President Shaw, do you have any questions?
Questions?
Thank you. Council Member Zoidhauser.
Questions?
Thank you. Council Member Peel.
No questions.
Thank you. Council Member Circo.
No questions.
Thank you. Council Member Barr.
no questions.
And Mr. Town Manager, has any resident or guest indicated?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council, are you prepared to make a motion?
I move approval of a 3-month extension through July 27th, 2021 to the open building construction permit granted to Megan Spalacy at the property located at 5508 Uppingham Street.
Thank you. Is there a second? I see Zoe Kaiser. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Both of those carried 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Town Attorney. The next item is public hearing motion to consider approval of a construction permit submitted by Patrick Heaton for demolition, new construction, driveway apron, retaining wall dumpster, HVAC unit, and tree removal on the property located at 4519 Cumberland Avenue. So we will now begin. This is a hearing before the Town of Somerset Council for permit application number 200406-NC to consider approval of a building permit application submitted by Pat Keating, representing 4519 Cumberland Street LLC, for demolition, new construction, driveway apron, retaining wall dumpster, HVAC unit, and tree removal on the property located at 4519 Cumberland Avenue. The hearing will observe the following order. First, the Somerset Town staff, including the town manager, building administrator, and town arborist, will present their findings and submit for the record a report on the application under consideration. Next, the applicant and/or their representatives will present their application and/or comment on the staff report. Next, the Somerset Town Council each member will have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant or staff relevant to the application at hand. Next, there will be continuing the public hearing where other interested parties, including town residents and guests, will have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant or staff only, or make comments to the council, applicant, or staff on the application at hand. Then, after that is concluded, the applicant will have the opportunity for rebuttal testimony, after which the public comment period of the hearing shall be completed and the record closed. After that, the council will deliberate, discuss among themselves the merits of the case, the findings of fact and conclusions. The council may make a motion on a permit decision. If any opposition is presented, the town attorney will be asked to write a decision, and a permit shall not be issued before the expiration of 30 days to allow time for an appeal. If no opposition is presented, the town manager will be asked to issue a permit. In order to keep the meeting flowing in a timely and orderly fashion, I ask that residents be limited to one comment each, and that they be limited, well, right now, we're suggesting 5 minutes per comment, but what I would like to do is after the formal part of the hearing is completed, we will ask all the residents who wish to speak to the application to raise their hand, and then we will, because we don't want this to go on all night, but we want everyone to have an opportunity to speak or ask questions. And we will then determine how much time we will give each member of the public to speak. And then the town manager will call on residents by name, and remember to state your name and street before you speak. And we'll review that again at the time. So we will now begin the hearing with the presentation of the staff findings and reports. So I turn it over to the town manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is rehashing some of the information that you had already provided, but the property owner, Patrick Keating, on behalf of 4519 Cumberland Street LLC, submitted an application to the town on March 4th of 2021 to construct a new home and detached garage and accompanying work, including demolition, driveway apron reconstruction, patio construction, in-ground pool installation, wall construction, HVAC and generator installations, dumpster storage, and tree removal. The applicant has submitted all bond and fee payments and satisfied the application submission requirements per sections 112.5 and 112.6 of the town code. The town arborist, Dr. Tolbert Feather, has prepared tree replacement and tree protection recommendations for the council's consideration. And the building administrator, Douglas Lohmeyer, PE, has prepared a report for the council with regards to the objective criteria listed in the Somerset Town Code. Additionally, Mr. Lohmeyer has assisted staff in preparing a brief memo synthesizing the county's approved stormwater and sediment control plans, which were submitted as part of the application to the town. The town received a total of 14 emails and or memos relating to this property and proposed construction from residents of Somerset, and in one instance, the father of a current resident who is currently living out of state and who is a professional engineer. In summary, the comments generally pertain to stormwater management and runoff. 10 of the messages requested that the council reject or delay a decision of the application on the grounds that it interferes with the neighbors' enjoyment of their property, and that additional amelioration efforts be taken to reduce the water runoff to the neighboring property, specifically at 4517 Cumberland Avenue. 7 messages also requested that the council rethink the stormwater approval process in the town of Somerset and or add additional stormwater management requirements. I would now like to turn it over to our town's building administrator, Doug Lohmeyer, for his report.
Good evening. The application for a demolition and building permit indicates that the proposed house will be set back 29.9 feet from Cumberland Avenue. The left side setback will be 12 feet. The right side setback will be 8.4 feet. The rear setback will be a minimum of 60 feet. All those setbacks comply with the town code. The mean building height will be 27.5 feet, which is under the maximum height allowed in the code. The applicants have submitted a parking plan which indicates 2 cars will be parked on Cumberland Avenue with 3 cars parked on the lot. The plan also includes a stormwater management plan, which includes 4 dry wells and an attenuation device. Also included is an accessory building behind, detached garage behind the house. The left side setback is 5.3 feet from the side property line. The right side setback is 53 feet. Building height will be 10 feet, and the rear setback will be 10.1 feet. All of those setbacks comply with the code as far as an accessory structure. So I would recommend that the council approve the applicant for a demolition, dumpster, driveway apron, retaining wall, fence, and building permits. And I also recommend that the applicant submit a wall check and a height certification for both the main building and the accessory building. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. And I assume Dr. Feather is going to be reporting.
Yes, Tolbert, are you available? He had sent me a message that he was running a little bit late. He's unfortunately babysitting his grandkids. And so he said that he would join as soon as they were gone. I can try to, if you'd like, I can try to summarize.
Why don't you try to summarize? And then
Sure.
Maybe you could text him afterward in case he needs to be available for question and answer.
Sure. So the property currently has 7 trees that are of the size that would require permits or tree protection for construction. The plan that Tolbert has put before you is calling for the protection and preservation of one of the trees that is on town property in the town, in the town right of way in front of the proposed house, a red maple, which is the only canopy tree of the 6. The other 6 trees are being recommended for removal for a variety of reasons, generally because they are in the foundation of the construction or too close to the construction, whether it's the house, the retaining wall, or the driveway. Tolbert's plan does call for 2 evergreen trees to replace them, 2 canopy trees, and he's recommending a red oak, a white oak, willow oak, sugar maple, red maple, or black gum, and 2 ornamental trees. So all in all, six trees to replace the 6 trees that are removed, a net of 2 new canopy trees. The largest tree that's being removed is a fully matured flowering cherry that measures 27 inches in base diameter. The bond requirements would be $500 each for the 6 trees for $3,000, which will be held by the town until the planting of new trees per Tolbert's recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Do you know if Dr. Feather happens to be?
He had said that he was going to be here at 5:20, which was the scheduled time. So I'll try to get in touch with him and see if he's able to join us.
Why don't you just quickly text him just for a minute
Okay.
and see if he responds. No response.
Not yet.
Okay, so I think we will now ask Mr. Keating to present his application and/or comment on the report, the staff report. And since all the information has been previously presented to the council and to the public, you don't have to take a lot of time, Mr. Keating. But welcome. And you need to unmute. Take your time. Can you help him, Matt? Can you help him?
Okay,
There you go. Thank you.
thank you. My name is Pat Keating, together with my partner, Tom Kehoe, who is here as well. We appreciate you considering this application. I've also got Jeff Robertson, my civil engineer, here to address some of the questions relating to the runoff. And I agree with everything that Doug and Matt have presented, and Tolbert as well. We've worked very hard to have a complete permit for you to consider. We have worked very hard, I believe, to work with the neighbors downstream as well as upstream to manage the flow of water. We've also, along with the county approved stormwater plan, we've added attenuation devices, which will do 2 things. It will help manage the flow of the water where it exits our property so that it can then be managed downstream. And it also brings the property to a point where there's less runoff post-development than pre-development. And some of those things we've called attenuation devices. They're just engineered devices that collect the water, introduce it to the ground, and then let it flow off our property. Very similar to the way it flows onto our property. We are in a close to a 2-acre zone of where we're downhill. And so we manage water from above. We manage it across our property, and we believe we have a responsible plan where we've managed the water going downstream. And we have met with the neighbors, described our plan on site, and answered a fairly heavy volume of questions, technical questions, related to that plan. That's all I have.
Is that the conclusion of your report?
That's the conclusion, yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Council President Shaw, do you have any questions?
I'm not a stormwater engineer, and frankly, you know, we as our town manager said, most of the comments that the council has received from residents has been around stormwater, and so I'd like a little bit more of a description. You talked a little bit about the other properties around that are creating stormwater on the property that you intend to build on, as well as the neighbor's property. So if you could say a little bit more about that, and then a little bit about the difference between the county saying it's granting a waiver for 50%, and you're saying that you're actually going to have less water running off the property post-construction than currently. You can understand why somebody who's not a stormwater engineer would find all these different factors kind of confusing. And I guess a fourth thing would be, is there anything else that you can do that would mitigate the water? Stormwater.
I know that it's confusing. The way stormwater management is designed is confusing. And I'm not going to say that I'm an expert at all. So I may defer to Jeff Robertson, who's here, but we have, in our discussions with the neighbors, we've tried to understand what the issues were downstream of us. Upstream, there's not much I can do. I have to manage that water. The county requires me to do that. I'm not allowed to stop the flow of water upstream. And on our plan describes the upstream land that does flow over my property. And the county's very explicit in that I can't stop that flow. So in my view, the new home, and of course, this is, you know, our objective from the very beginning of the design, was to improve the situation there, because I understand from previous, you know, video footage, that the issue downstream, 4517 and 4515, can get quite a lot of water. And fortunately, they do have a drain that is designed to handle that water. But there's nothing I can do. The only thing that I can really manage is what flows across my property. And in addition to what, and just in layman's terms, the county only allows us a certain amount of stormwater management to install on the property. We've maximized the amount of stormwater management we can put on our property. And that's why we got the waiver. But in addition to that, we have added one attenuation device on the property line that shares 4517. I'm 4519, so the property to the right of me as you're facing it. The attenuation device is designed as what we call a super spreader, so that the water flows, that the water that is not captured by my stormwater pits and the water that flows over my property from above flows into this attenuation device and is allowed to percolate into the ground. When that attenuation device is full, the reason it's called a super spreader in layman's terms is that it does not allow a point flow of discharge. The water, the point upon which it discharges the property is perfectly level. So this device, which is built with rain tanks, and above that is gravel. When it fills up, it then discharges the water along a 16 to 20 foot area. And we place that attenuation device as high up on the property as possible, given our design, so that it was practically away from the neighboring foundation. So we did meet with the neighbor, and we discussed ways that they could mitigate it on their property. But on our property, this is our plan. To get into the very nitty gritty of a stormwater plan, I'd have to defer to Jeff Robertson as to what the county requirements were, how we met them, and how they came to what you call a stormwater waiver, which is basically, in my view, we've done everything we can possibly do to manage water on the property, and the county has accepted it and given us a permit. And then in addition to that, we've added these attenuation devices which treat more water. The objective is so that the water is managed, both from upstream, I can manage it, and from downstream, it can be managed once it leaves our property. If there's additional questions, I'll defer to Jeff and he can answer those, but you just have to be explicit as possible for him to answer it. Because we really can get in the weeds, with percolation rates and things like that.
One other quick question I have, Mr. Keating, and that is, the council was given evidence that the emails were sent to the adjacent properties, but did you actually get signatures from the neighbors? We don't have anything in our package that indicates that.
I'm not sure, no, because with COVID, we were told that we had to do an email, or that was the best way. So we sent emails and tried to just make certain that the neighbors got the emails. We were not getting signatures back, I don't believe.
That's not even like we got your notification.
We certainly asked for that, but I don't know how many we got back. I mean, I had dialogue with certain neighbors, and I copied everybody that I thought would be, would have an interest in it. And so through that dialogue, is probably the only response. Nobody said, I got this email.
I guess, I don't know whether you want to try and answer this or your civil engineer, and that was, is there anything else that you can do on your property that would mitigate water going to your neighbors?
Jeff, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, Pat.
Okay.
Jeff Robertson with Cass Engineering.
Thank you.
So just a little bit of background first. So this plan, as approved by Montgomery County, meets both county and state requirements for stormwater management. While in the technical sense of the term, a waiver was issued, the requirements, if you want to call them requirements, are a target requirement. So the volume that's been kicked around and the volume that's shown on the plan at 1,038.1 cubic feet is a target volume that, in the best case scenario, we could provide that volume on site. we were not able to provide that volume in terms of stormwater management. We were able to provide 524.4 cubic feet, which equates to 1 inch of runoff and meets the county and state requirements for stormwater management. So the attenuation device that Pat mentioned is a level spreader that contains rain tanks and gravel, and it provides some additional storage volume. This was an elective device. It wasn't required by the county or by the state. Pat elected to install this device and to help to provide some volume control for runoff leaving the site. It's important to recognize that the subject property lies, downhill from 7 or 8 other properties in the town, and some along Drummond. Combined town and Drummond. There's about 2 acres of drainage area that flows through the subject property. All of that water drains to a storm drain located on 4515 Cumberland Avenue. And that particular drain probably, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but probably receives another 2 acres of drainage area from the east. So all told, there's over 4 acres of drainage area going to that drain. The subject project is not required to store or manage any of that volume, any of that upstream volume. It's simply required to convey it, not block it, not dam it up, or any of those types of things that would alter that. So what you've heard is that the plan manages the water, but it does that by allowing the water to convey and to continue to flow from higher elevation to lower elevation. So the attenuation device, again, is an added measure that is proposed. It's elective, and its result is that there is a net increase over a 2-inch storm of 0 cubic feet when you would compare existing runoff to proposed runoff. So we believe what the plan that's in front of you is a best management practices plan that provides more control than was in place previously, and should offer a better downstream drainage situation than we have today.
Mr. Robertson, one other quick question. You mentioned the storm drain on the property next door to you. I don't know, did you have any sense of whether it was an adequate storm drain?
So the storm drain is actually at 4515, one lot removed from the subject property. Coincidentally, we had Cass Engineering had developed the plans for that property when it was constructed a number of years ago. I think around 2011, 2012 timeframe. I did not go back and look through those details to determine whether or not that storm drain was adequate. I do know that it is a completely buried system from 4515. It crosses Cumberland Avenue, runs adjacent to the tennis court, and then outfalls on town property. And my information is right, it's a 15-inch diameter pipe.
Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions right now.
Okay, thank you, Council President Shaw. I did want everyone to know that the town arborist, Dr. Feather, has joined, and in case you had a question of him, Council President Shaw.
No questions.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Zoighauser. You're muted. Matt's gonna unmute you, I think.
First, I'd like to thank both of you for being here and for your description. That was very helpful to me. I guess the only question or point that I'd like to clarify is and if you could just repeat it maybe one more time. It sounds like you've done as much as you can on your property, but that has nothing to do with the 7 or 8 other homes that are on town property and on the property behind on Drummond. And that's could be, if I'm not familiar with those homes. I don't know if they're new homes or older homes, but those homes are creating quite a bit of water as well. Am I hearing you correctly?
Again, Jeff Robertson with Cass Engineering. Yeah, I haven't done calculations as to exactly how much runoff those are contributing. But it's a significant drainage area. It's 2 acres upstream to the west, and then possibly another 2 acres to the east. So I don't know if any of those other projects or properties are providing any sort of stormwater management devices or drainage controls. But, the subject property, equates to, 10% or less of that, that overall drainage area.
All right. Okay. Thank you. That was my only question. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Peel.
Now that I see that Dr. Feather is here, my first question was for him, and I just wondered whether when you were looking at the placement of the 6 trees that you intend to plant, do you feel like you've sort of maximized your opportunity for helping with some of the drainage issues when you're looking at the location of the trees?
Yeah, I don't choose the locations, the owner does.
Well, in this instance, do you think that you would have a recommendation to make in terms of how the tree placement might help with some of the issues on the site?
I think the most space is going to be in the back. So, and then there's 2 canopy trees, and the rest are ornamental and evergreen. So, but I think in front, there's already a street tree on the, you might be able to get a large tree on the left side, but I think most of the space is going to be in the back.
And do you think that the canopy trees would be successful in the backyard?
Yeah, yes, there's enough light and, there's, we plant them on streets, so there's space too, so.
Right, I was looking at the drainage patterns that we have on our plans, and I was just wondering whether some of the water coming from uphill could be, I recognize it would be over time because canopy trees have to grow, but I just did wonder whether a long-term, whether it would be a long-term improvement for this property to have the canopy trees in the backyard to help manage some of the water that comes through the backyard area toward the adjacent property. And so I recognize that, Dr. Feather, you're not placing the trees, you're just requiring the types of trees, but I just wonder whether it would be your opinion that the canopy trees could be used in the back.
Yeah, I think there's not much space in the front anyway, so the back is where they're gonna have to go.
Okay. I did have a question for Mr. Robertson. I just wanted to understand how swimming pools work with stormwater management. I understand that they're considered to be impervious under the county's rules, but I guess, you know, I'm not an engineer, but it seems to me that they don't create a runoff problem because they would be capturing some amount of water if it rained heavily. I just wondered if you could tell me what you might know about swimming pools and how that, you know, I look at the square footage for the pool and I just wonder whether to consider that to be impervious in the same sense that a driveway would be, or whether it's something in between.
Sure. So there's a catch-22 at the county. They require pools to be included as impervious areas, but there is no physical way to treat the water that lands on the surface of a pool. So it works against the project for you know, total volume target. And there's no way to really collect it and treat it in the ultimate design.
Okay, and then the other question I had, I guess, is for Mr. Keating, and I know that I read in your plans that there wasn't enough drainage space for permeable pavers for the driveway, but because it is a long driveway, and there are sort of two parts to it, obviously, as you know, I just wonder whether there'll be any, you know, anything that could be done with the driveway. Could it be gravel? Could it have a strip of, you know, grass down the center of it? Is there anything that you could envision that might help with the impervious surface presented by the driveway?
Well, what I'd like to do is perhaps consider another attenuation device in the center of the driveway in the back. Because of the placement of the tanks in the front, an impervious driveway wouldn't be allowed in the front. And I don't want to break up the driveway into two different materials.
Right.
But the attenuation device seems practical so that I could capture water upstream, control it on my property,
Right.
and then add that much more volume to the management on my property. And that's something that you know, I would certainly offer in addition to the attenuation device on the east side of the property.
Right. And I did want to just follow up with you on that, because I just had in my notes a few times you mentioned attenuation devices, and I just wondered, because I had just seen on the plans that there was just the one on the 4517 side. But when you were speaking that way, were you speaking generally about them, or did you already have two of them in mind, or did I miss one on the plan?
Yes, I'd like to, I don't have it on the plan, but I'd like to put another attenuation device in front of my detached garage in the driveway, in the center of that driveway.
Would that be something that would be comparable in terms of the volume to the one that you've already got on the plans?
Yes, we've already added, it's not on the plans, but we're already going to add 30% volume. We're going to put more rain tanks into the device on the east side. The one that we would propose that's not in the plans on the west side would be the same 121 cubic feet that is on the plans at the moment. So we do plan to we are planning on making putting as many of these devices as practical. And you also mentioned the trees, and I would work with Tolbert for a water loving tree, because behind my retaining wall that perhaps catches extra stormwater from above. But I would have to work with Dr. Feather as to what species canopy tree would allow that, would thrive in a situation where
there's a wall.
Perhaps it's collecting water, a swamp oak, you know, there's a number of them. I just don't know which one would be the best.
Okay, so it sounds to me like just from our conversation right now that we may in fact already have some additional improvements in mind to address some of the concerns of some of the residents. So I'm very encouraged to hear that. And I guess when we get down the road, I'd be happy to work with you on on figuring out the language for, necessary language on amending the building permit application to incorporate those ideas. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Circo.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you all for the presentation and discussions up to this through here. I think a couple of questions. First one is for our town arborist. I know that there is a large maple on the neighbor's property by the driveway. Does that maple require an exclusion zone to protect it? It just seems kind of close to the driveway.
Yeah, I looked at that at the time and I think it's going to be okay on that side.
Okay, thank you. I want to follow up. I'm concerned about the amount of impervious surface, like the over 1,000 square feet of the driveway on the side of the house is impervious, and that just will offload to neighbors or cause damage to the house. Sorry, this is going to the builder now. So, why is it not possible to, I guess, to switch to permeable pavers for the driveway along the side of the house?
On the side of the house, because the water would then be introduced to a device that's already engineered for the downspout runoff. So the two tanks in the front would then be getting contaminated by that water. So the county discourages that. So as I mentioned earlier, in lieu of that, we can put an attenuation device that would capture the same amount of water that runs off that driveway. But the bottom line is I just don't think it would look very good to have impervious in the front and pervious in the back. So we've come up with another method to deal with that, which is another attenuation device. But the county wouldn't approve a plan if I put a pervious driveway in the front.
I understand for doing the whole driveway as pervious, but what I'm hearing is it's an aesthetic decision not to change from impervious to pervious. I'm not criticizing, I'm just trying to understand.
So Jeff Robertson with Cass Engineering. So the county has some limitations on where permeable driveways can be placed. And one of those limitations is that it must be more than 10 feet from a building. Okay. And given the close proximity of the driveway to the building, we didn't believe that was a good approach in that area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Barr.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Mr. Keating, for all the efforts in trying to capture the water. It truly is the most complex design that I've seen in Somerset. That gets my cranky side, unfortunately, because I go, this really is complex. The accessory units are multi-unit. There are multiple tanks, rain tanks in modules in there. The dry wells are not unitary. I mean, they've got filters on the gutters to clean the water for the dry wells, and they've got pop-up valves to release. There's a whole lot of infrastructure there, and every time I go a whole lot of infrastructure, I go high maintenance. I mean, it's like, so have you considered the longer term maintenance for this complex set of water capture devices that you have? And have you got any plans for that?
I'd let Mr. Robertson speak to that. That's a county code whereby we have given the county, if they aren't maintained or aren't clean or don't work, the county has a right to come on our property and change those out at our, or modify them at our cost. But for the most part, they're pretty low tech in that, you know, the water goes in, we've done infiltration studies, we've done core drillings on the property, so we know how much water will percolate. And so the only way it could get contaminated is, I think, is from dirt and mud, and we have protection barriers that prevent that. Well, we've been putting these devices in for 20 some years, and honestly, I've never had one not work. So I think just, I don't know, there's a foolproof guarantee that the water will continue to go through the earth as it does now, but from what I know, it will continue to operate into the future.
Are the 2 accessory units that you're putting in covered by the county code?
They are not. They have requirements as to, that is not part of the county plan. Let me just say that. They're not required by the county. They're not approved by the county. I will say that they're encouraged because they help with the stormwater, but
Right,
under
I
the
mean,
county guidelines, they can't consider them.
Yeah, I'm not discouraging them from them, but I'm asking about maintenance on them because there isn't a schedule of maintenance on them.
There's not, I'm not aware of any maintenance you can do on them.
Keeping the top clear, I mean, you know, something that simple, if leaves block it or something like that.
Well, that's pretty simple. Yes, that can be done, but the inside, it's, as I mentioned, it's low tech. The water percolates into the ground. The rain tanks that we put in create a void that collect water, and the device is wrapped in a filter cloth that keeps the dirt out. And it's just that simple.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Before we go to testimony from residents or guests, I do want to run through the council again to make sure everyone's questions have been answered. Council President Shaw, do you have any additional questions?
Question, but I do want to say I was very happy to hear Mr. Keating volunteer to put in an additional attenuator. Is that what they're called? That would be great.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Zoighauser.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Peel.
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Circo. Do you have any further questions?
I have one more question that might not be, I don't think the answer can be quantified, but maybe the engineer could give sort of a qualitative assessment. So know that the tanks are designed, the dry wells are designed to sort the stormwater runoff from the impervious surfaces from a 1-inch rainfall in like a 24-hour period. And I understand that this design and all the tanks would work well. So this house should not, change the burden on the neighbors. But if there's like a 2-inch rainfall and all those tanks are full up, what happens?
The water flows as it does today from upstream to downstream.
Okay.
It just drains across the property.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
And Councilor Barr, do you have a further?
Well, this one really is flaky, I have to admit. It goes back to the design of the house. What led you to the detached garage at the back rather than a double garage at the front, which would have made the whole stormwater controls easier if you'd done that?
Aesthetics. It's very hard to make a 2-car garage up front look the way I want the building to look.
Yeah.
So we put the 1 car in for practical purposes and the 2-car, which is which is what the market is
Right. Yeah.
requiring in the back.
Let me ask you one rider to that, which is at the moment you've got a little bit of space in the setback requirements. Suppose we actually give you a variance. in the setback, or you apply for variance so that you can move to 8 feet back from the side, I guess uphill from you. It will give you 4 more feet of house. It'd be easier to put in a double garage at that point.
The delay wouldn't the delay and the uncertainty. We try to, when we put a plan forth, we try to stay within the bounds of the code, and that's what we've done. So at this point in the stage, to go outside of the code and consider a variance and the uncertainty and the time just doesn't make sense for us.
No, I understand it's a bit late. Yeah, water under the bridge already. Yeah.
That would also require a county variance.
Yeah, you'd have to go back to the county with a revised plan. Yes.
Thank you, Councilor Barr. So before we open the floor for comments from our residents and guests, I would like everyone who would like to testify to please raise your hand in the chat. Is that right, Mr. Town Manager? Because we do want to limit, in the interest of time, we want to limit the time period we devote to public testimony to no more than 30 minutes. So could everyone who would like to speak raise your hand now?
Yes, there's a raise hand function, or if people are having difficulty with that, they
So
can
why
also
don't you call-
send me
why
a
don't you
direct
call-
chat message.
Why don't you call the names of the people that you have said they want to testify and see if anybody else?
Yep. So the first person is Julie Greenberg.
No. I want to know.
Oh.
I want to know the number so we can set the time limit.
Okay. At this point, there is 4 people who have raised their hand.
Okay.
So I think that's
'Cause I do want
that's
to
at least
encourage
it for the
everyone-
first round.
Because I do want to encourage, well, there's only going to be one round of public.
Right.
So I would like to ask anyone, you can change your mind. Sue,
There's-
is there anybody else?
We have a 5th and 6th person.
Okay, there's 6 people.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna close it at 6, and since we wanted to do 30 minutes, each person testifying will have up to 5. anybody
7 now. I'm sorry, 7.
Okay, so I think it's way more than ample if each person is limited to 4 minutes. That's more than any other. So, so we ask that those making public comments, please be respectful of everyone's time. Keep all testimony and evidence relevant to the application at hand and not be repetitive. Questions may be posed to the applicant or the town staff, of course, the applicant or any of the applicant's associates, or the town staff. But questions to the council are not really appropriate. These are for questions to the staff or the applicant. And as previously mentioned, we are asking that we're limited to 1 comment each and that they be limited to 4 minutes. The town manager will call on residents by listed name. When you speak, please state your name and street before you make your comment. When your time is up, a buzzer will sound. We will be flexible because perhaps the answer might be a little longer. So I'm not going to be, but we do have other agenda items tonight, so we don't want to for this to be elongated too much. So with that, Mr. Town Manager, please call on the first person.
Sure. The first person that I saw raise their hand was Julie Greenberg.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks. I'd like to defer to Shannon Roebuck and give her 3 of my minutes, and then I'll come in at 1 minute whenever you next call on me.
Thank you. That's very, very nice. Just like the Congress.
I know, right? I'm Shannon Roebuck. I live next door to the proposed property. I live at, we and my husband, Kenny, we live at 4517 Cumberland Avenue. And, you know, I don't know. I've got a lot of thoughts about and questions as far as like what I've heard tonight. But, you know, we've been incredibly concerned about this house and this change since we found out that a builder had bought it and is tearing it down. And so we made our pleas known to all the people at Montgomery County and whomever really we could find to tell them, because we have significant water runoff that already comes from this lot, which you've heard tonight, right? They've already said that. So part of the problem, as Pat noted, is that he can't do anything about the uphill neighbor from him because he gets significant runoff that comes into his property. And what they're talking about here with these waivers and what they're doing as far as like the water that's coming out there, that water does not include any of the above too. So what is included in that water is simply the rain that falls from the sky and lands onto that property, and then what they do with that. So it doesn't include the fact that now all this upstream water is coming down and it's meeting a new lot that is going to be, you know, an increase of 70% more impervious. And I think that the whole lot is about 59% or 58.9% impervious. So this water now has a different course and a different path, and we're not even talking about that. And so obviously you can see the intense amount of, you know, panic that I really have with this water. And so I'm happy that they've put in a couple of different attenuation devices. One is in the plan. One has not been incorporated into the plan that I have seen. And so I know that he mentioned it tonight, which is great. Those attenuation devices are not recognized by the county and by the state of Maryland as appropriate ESD devices to control the water. And they aren't, basically, from my understanding, again, I'm not an engineer, but they are too close to everything else. And so therefore there's too much, like, you know, when they're talking about, I can't do the permeable paver because it's too close to this dry well. And so this attenuation device is simply, number one, too close to my lot line, I believe what they said. And then number two is too close to the other device. So we're crowding it all onto this property, and it's giving me grave concern. They've said that we will see an increase of water of 44% over what we get now. That, again, doesn't include anything from uphill. That's just the rain that's coming down from there. And so my basement flooded with 3.5 feet of water within 5 minutes. And I wake up at night freaking out about heavy rain. Our washing machine and dryer got unhooked from the wall. It moved a wall. I mean, it was life-changing. And so, you know, the thought of now being faced with unimproved devices that are on a plan with the 50% water waiver is just, it's just too outrageous for me to even think about. So now we've gone back and we've really gotten to like, okay, well, who cares about this issue? Because someone has to care, right? Someone has to care that water is coming all over the place to everyone and they're going to flood. So we appealed it to the Montgomery County, and the director Ortiz said the DEP has no authority over drainage specifics, which leaves that in the hands of the local municipality. So, you know, if we allow as a local municipality these waivers to come through our town, we're just creating we're adding to a problem that is already a very, you know, important existing problem within our town. And so it's exactly like the people at Drummond. I can't control them, right? So they do things and they come and President and come up and so, you know, but having a new build and not making them control their own water through approved devices that are in this Montgomery County code is just adding to the problem. And so I guess I just went on and I didn't ask a question.
Please feel free to
but-
ask, please feel free to ask a question, Shannon.
Are we setting a precedent to future town developers that we're just gonna accept this and let this runoff water come everywhere?
And who are you asking that question to?
I guess
Well,
I can't ask the
First, did you want to ask any questions of the applicant?
I would. So of the applicant,
And then for that first question, perhaps the town attorney can address that.
yeah.
But but I think you have questions for the applicant.
So for the applicant, so one of the things that it shows is all of the areas where they are not able to control or contain the runoff up to 2 inches of rain. So they show that 1038 is the, as Jeff said, goal, but not, I don't know what he said, but then they're controlling 524.4 of that cubic feet. So my question is, where does the rest of that 514 cubic feet of water go?
Because it's in trenches right now.
This is Pat Keating. Unfortunately, I've got a long-standing family engagement, and I'm going to have to defer to Jeff and my partner, Tom Kehoe, for that question. And so I want to thank everybody, and I will certainly try to
So
call later.
but your partner is prepared to answer on behalf of the partnership and the application, right?
He is indeed.
Okay.
He
so
can
is
speak for me.
Is he on a screen?
Yes.
Thomas has been here all along.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Keating, for being here. And now we will ask Mr. Kehoe or Mr. Robertson to answer the question.
Thank you, Mayor Slavin. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jeff Robertson with Cass Engineering. So the, again, the 1,000 cubic feet value is a target. It's an ideal target that Montgomery County and the state have put forth as part of their stormwater management regulations. The fact that the project provides 524 cubic feet means that it has met the requirements to the maximum extent practicable. So in other words, there is no other or no additional space for which to provide a county/state stormwater management device.
And so again, where does that 514 inches or cubic feet, where does it go?
It goes where everything else goes, from upstream to downstream.
And so how is that broken out to 4517 to 4515 versus going to Cumberland versus going to 4521? Like where is the flow path of that water go?
I can't tell you precisely where it goes. Some of it goes through the attenuation device, which is why it was positioned in that location, was to collect some of that runoff. Some of it goes to the back of the lot. That's the majority of the runoff is going from west to east across the rear of this property. Very little going from the front.
So when it says like, if you get 121 more cubic feet is coming into my lot that will be contained by this attenuation device that is not approved. So that's 121 of the 514. Where's the rest?
I don't know what you mean by where's the rest.
It says that you're not covering in a 2-inch rain, 514 cubic feet is not being covered through your plan. So I'm just asking where does this water go? If you're saying to me 44% more is going to our lot, and that equates to 121 extra. Where is the remaining from 514 minus 121 going?
Those are different calculations. The attenuation device compares existing versus proposed runoff leaving the site over a 2-year storm. So that device is sized such that that additional runoff is captured. So over a 2-inch storm, no additional runoff is leaving the site.
So,
Go ahead.
so is that then the 514 minus 121? So, I mean, I guess I find it hard to, like, I guess I'm confused where the rest of that would go. Does it go to 4521? Does it go to Cumberland?
Does it go? Well, 4521 is uphill.
So do you think that based on your calculations of the extra 44% that would be coming into my lot and then therefore into the drain at 4515, do you think that that calculation is accurate, or could we be seeing more of this 514 that was originally the amount that was waived for?
I'm thinking through that question. So again, so the stormwater management calculations are a target value. The stormwater management law has been addressed. It has been met for this project. The attenuation device is an additional method that considers the calculation between existing and proposed conditions. Stormwater management doesn't consider existing conditions at all. So there's no credit given for runoff generated from existing conditions.
Yeah, and that's just for pollution. They're not even talking about drainage, correct?
Right.
Montgomery County's only regulating pollution control, right?
Don't forget to identify yourself.
Yeah, I'm the other resident here, Kenny Rovac. I mean, I keep going back to, Montgomery County is regulating pollution control, but none of this has to do with drainage. I mean, we keep saying, well, they issued the permit, but again, we're talking about drainage here, and that's not something that was considered.
Well, the drainage was considered in terms of the attenuation device. There's still the stormwater management measures that have been proposed still provide some drainage control. But their goal is to get water back into the ground where it can infiltrate. The attenuation device is just an added measure to provide some additional volume control of that drainage.
So I know I sent a couple emails this week about this and I still haven't heard the answer. So the trench that was dug in the back of the yard right now has standing water that's almost at surface level from the rain that happened on Wednesday. And it is just not infiltrating into the soil. Is that a concern? And has the plan been built around that?
I saw the pictures that you sent. I have not been back to the site to look at any of that. I don't know if Tom can speak to that or not. Are those openings, have they drained out?
They have not drained out yet.
And what are those?
That water has been slowly trickling into that trench since last week. The rain on Wednesday added to it. However, there was already sitting water in that trench previous to that rain.
What are those trenches for?
The retaining wall in the back. That is on the plan.
Gotcha. Okay, I couldn't follow exactly where that was from the from the pictures.
So is that concerning that this hasn't drained yet from rains like previous to Wednesday and Wednesday? Because it hasn't rained since Wednesday and it's still standing in there.
I mean, I suppose there could be some clay in that soil back there.
Yeah.
The soil test that was done was kind of in the middle of the pool. We didn't do any testing further back. And that test that we did do was simply a classification test that found the soil to be acceptable for stormwater management devices. It wasn't an infiltration test.
So, I mean, is that something that we should recommend to do an infiltration test? Because if this water isn't moving into this, if it's not being absorbed by this land anyways, really, then isn't it just compounding to the runoff?
You're still going to get some storage of the storm in the devices. Just may take them longer than 48 hours to actually dewater.
But I mean, it's been since Wednesday and it's now Tuesday. It's almost a week and it's still, it looks like it's barely moved. I don't know, Tom, if you've been out there, if you think that it's moved at all. I don't think it's moved at all.
It has not looked like it's moved.
Yeah, and we don't want to ambush you guys. These might be questions for
Yeah,
Pat.
sorry.
He's already, Pat might be taking care of this or something already, so I apologize.
Well,
Might be.
I think you have a lot of important questions that, since you're the most affected party here, I think it's important to get on the record your questions and the answers so that the council can make the most, the best decision. So don't feel that the time constraint should stop you from making sure you get all your questions answered.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate it. So Jeff and Tom, I mean, my understanding is that this trench then will go into and feed into the dry wells that are part of the approved ones that you're doing here and collect with the dry wells. But if we get substantial rain on top of another substantial rain, and right now this is not infiltrating into the soil, aren't we going to fill those dry wells and deem them pretty ineffective pretty quickly?
The attenuation devices do not filter into those dry wells at all. The attenuation devices have a sheet flow. So once those fill up and whatever dissipates into the ground, they will slowly flow out of that attenuation device and across the lot.
But I mean, couldn't it be that the dry wells will get so filled now if there's so much rain on top of rain that the dry wells that you're adding are going to overflow and then not be effective?
They are picking up different types of water. So all the water going into the dry wells are being picked up from roof surface, from our downspouts, and all the water that are going into the attenuation devices will be all from flowing over our land. So we are going above and beyond what the county requires us to do to mitigate our water from our site. And that they don't approve those attenuation devices because it's too close to the property line, not because it doesn't work properly or it's hard to maintain. It's simply they don't approve it because it's too close to that property line. However, it's placed on that property line in order to mitigate where the water is going to enter your site in order to help you all out. Because right now, water is going towards your foundation. So we place it uphill so that it has a better chance of going towards that drain that you share with your neighbor at 4515.
But that's not the problem, because we're not getting water through our foundation. What we're getting is a river across that pools up at the drain. And there's so much water going into the drain that it's taking longer for it to get into the drain. And then it's spilled over our steps down to the basement and rushed through the door. So it doesn't have any, I mean, knock on wood, our foundation is fine right now. It's from a flooding event where more and more water comes down, and it takes longer to get through the drain because they're getting it, as as Pat pointed out, they're getting it from 2 acres from that side and 2 acres from this side. And so we're just adding and adding to it, is really my concern, not the foundational concern.
So with our plan that we've designed here, I mean, we're taking steps that are above and beyond in order to mitigate better than the existing condition now. With those 2 attenuation devices added, we should see a increase in existing conditions of runoff from our site to your site. There will be 121 cubic feet increase of the rainwater that we are mitigating with the second attenuation device in the driveway. It's not the one shown on the plan, but in our discussion earlier, we had said that we were discussing putting another attenuation device in the middle of that driveway there, and it'll be the same size as the attenuation device on the right-hand side. And when you add those 2 numbers together, it will be better than our existing condition.
Okay, so one of the things when I asked the county back as to why they could approve this permit, Andrew Kohler had said that they very narrowly only look at sediment and erosion as part of their permitting process. And so he suggested that I work with all of you guys and come up with a good solution in terms of what can be done. And then he would expedite that plan back through the Montgomery system. He said he would be happy to do that. So is that something where we would be able to get what you guys are talking about as far as what you're willing to add in on top of what you've already added in? And are we able to get that added in the site plan and then you take Andrew up on his generous offer to have it expedited through and have them recalculate and relook at the potential waiver needed or what would be covered from that?
It is my understanding that they will not approve the attenuation device because it is too close to the property line, as well as it combats water flowing freely on the site. Jeff, please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Yeah, so there's a couple things. So Andrew's job is to review erosion control and stormwater management. And these attenuation devices aren't stormwater management devices because they are not approved by Montgomery County to collect surface runoff. Surface runoff can be collected and approved by Montgomery County in terms of rain gardens, landscape infiltration facilities, microbial retention devices, things of that nature. Those are, if you're not familiar with them, they're depressions that will hold water on the surface. They also provide storage below grade, but primarily there's 6 to 12 inches of ponding water in them with plant material and mulch. There are prescribed setbacks and locations and all sorts of different criteria that those devices need to be approved by. And there is no available space on this property to implement any of those devices.
Because the overbuild on this property is so much. I mean, so is there
not necessarily?
Well, I mean, the property is only 10,400 square feet or whatever it is. And, to put on, you've got 2 driveways. You said to host 3 cars, plus a garage, a detached garage, a pool, a patio, a 5-bedroom house with 5.5 bedrooms and a back porch. I mean, to me, it seems like you could implement some of these permeable pavers and these other things if you were to remove some of the design plans.
Those devices have limitations too as to how much upstream drainage area they can accept. And those range from 2,000 square feet for a rain garden up to a maximum of 20,000 square feet for a microbial retention facility. The fact that there's 2 acres of upstream drainage area, you know, would severely limit their ability to function and be designed and approved. So
Okay.
while
Well, I'll turn it over to ask other questions from other people, but I just want to really stress that, you know, I want to make sure that we look at everything backwards and forwards and, you know, considering the water and the drainage and all of that stuff as a town of Somerset, because what we found right now, we've deemed it so important that we've you know, done a stormwater management committee, and they're in the midst of, you know, studying all this stuff right now and looking at all of the drainage and runoff issues that all of the neighbors have. And what they're finding, their initial finding from, you know, I guess hearsay or whatever, is that it's a really important issue to every single person in the town of Somerset. And so, you know, this just happens to be my unlucky straw that I drew that is next door to this potential overbuild and water runoff. But, you know, we're creating a bigger issue on top of an already existing issue as a town. And there's at least 3 other houses that are about to close that are going to be tear downs and rebuilds. And so, you know, it's hard to put together a stormwater management plan as a town where we're going to ask all these residents to do all these different things to help kind of mitigate the town runoff. But then at the same time, on a new build that's coming in, we're saying like, oh, well, we don't care, you know, 50% waiver and, you know, the runoff is here. So I really think that it's going to be establishing quite a precedent for these next houses that are going through that, you know, that as a town, you know, we really we have to do something about this. It's gotten worse and worse and worse. And, you know, that's where I guess I will sign off unless you want to say anything.
No, again, Kenny Rovac, Little Cumberland. I mean, the county's been very clear that stormwater is not a priority, so it's really up for the town to decide if it is. But thanks, guys.
So Shannon and Ken, I know you submitted a lot of questions in advance. I want to make sure that you got the answers on the record. So is there anything else?
I mean, frankly, I still don't understand where this extra 514 cubic feet is going of this water. And I mean, to me, it would be very helpful for me to understand where it's going in terms of drainage, so we can see if, you know, the 121 cubic feet that they're saying is coming in increase to us is not more than that.
So can the applicant specifically address that question?
Jeff, I'll have to defer to you on that.
Yeah. So the extra, if you want to call it extra, is not required. There is no required treatment for it. The stormwater management that has been proposed meets all county criteria for stormwater management.
But I'm not asking whether or not it's required or not from the county. I'm asking where the water is going.
The water's going from upstream to downstream, whether it's a 2-inch storm or a 4-inch storm or an 8-inch storm.
So of the 514 extra that we're not containing, how much of that will come to 4517 Cumberland?
I can't tell you precisely how much will come. I haven't done that calculation.
Would that be something that you would be able to do?
I suppose we could develop some sort of calculation that would, I'm just trying to think. It enters your property, but it doesn't enter your property in one specific location. So it would be a study of multiple sub drainage areas to figure out, you know, at certain intervals along the property line, how much water is entering your property.
So then could it be more than that 44% increase that you're saying that we're already gonna get?
The increase that the plans indicate is a comparison between existing and proposed. So that looks at just the holistic property and assumes that everything drains, or the majority of it drains right to your property. So that increase in a 2-year storm, there is no increase in a 2-year storm. Volumes being provided on site to address that 2-inch runoff.
Okay. Well, I just want to close by saying that, thanks you for everyone for letting me voice, and thank you, Mayor Slavin, for letting me voice our concerns, both of us. And, this is really personal to us, and I don't want to cry, but like, okay, I'm gonna cry. This is super personal to us because it was life-changing, like, no, stop. And so it was really, it was very personal to us. And no offense to Pat and Jeff and Tom, but they are building a building as a spec house. And you heard Pat say that the reason he can't do a driveway that is 2-car garage across and allow permeable area to be in that backyard is because of aesthetics and because of how houses look these days. And so, they are trying to maximize the profit on this house. And that is why I've asked him before when we had a meeting, can you remove the pool and the patio? Maybe that would help. Or can you do anything else for that? And he said that he has to have it permitted in that way in order to meet the market's demands for what people are looking for a house, I guess, in that level of spend. And I think that there's plenty of people in DC that buy houses without pools and, they don't need that. And so I would just really stress, like, from a town perspective, like, we don't have to do everything like that just because someone wants to maximize the profit on it. I mean, the poor people who buy this house, could have issues when it starts raining and they start to see this. There's no one there that's saying that they need a pool or a detached garage. It's the builder wanting to maximize the lot.
Okay, thank you, Shannon and Ken. And I do want to be clear that I am the impartial trier of fact here, whatever judge. But I would like to say, Shannon, that I do think you're ready for the Supreme Court. And with that, I would like to allow Congresswoman Julie Greenberg to reclaim her time.
Thank you. So I'm Julie Greenberg on Fallstone Avenue. And I have to think that if this recording is listened to in about 10 years after Somerset is basically a swamp, people are going to say, I cannot understand how in this area, this block that has such problems with flooding, that this over-engineered attempt at solving a problem with an overbuilt lot was even contemplated. That the idea that you would not just say everything on this lot has to be permeable in terms of the patio and the driveway. And if that means moving the house or making it smaller, do it. Because nothing's going on this lot that isn't permeable. We're putting the cart before the horse here. Now, Robin Barr's suggestion about can't you just make it a 2-car garage in the front of the house, eliminate that long driveway, eliminate that detached garage. And what's the problem with that? It's variances. So why not just get the variances? Just do it. This is absurd that we are creating this crisis situation when there is a design solution that makes a heck of a lot more sense. But nobody is pushing back for the exact reason that Shannon said. Shannon, I do believe you are ready for the Supreme Court. That was an excellent argument. You hit all the points and you actually got the bottom line here, which is just money. So this is ridiculous. Those attenuation devices are not approved by the county or the state. It has nothing to do with where they are located near the boundary. They're just not accepted. So why are we going to accept them here? I would really ask the council to just put the brakes on and say, go apply to the county and get a variance, come back to us and get a variance, and put the 2-car garage in the front of this house. Cut out that driveway, cut out the detached garage. This is not the place for those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Town Manager, who is next?
The next person was John Barry.
Thank you. Mr. Robertson, good evening.
John, remember to identify yourself.
Sorry, I'm John Barry, and my wife and I live on Cumberland Avenue at 4513, so we're sort of in the middle of the incipient swamp. Mr. Robertson, I'd like to take you back into some history, if you're there. Can you hear me?
Yes, he's
Yeah,
here.
I hear you.
He's here.
Thank you. Right. You did the work on 4515. Cast Engineering did the work on 4515, right?
Correct.
And that was done at a time when there was no waiver given by the county. The waiver came later. So the Davises had to cope with their runoff problems without a waiver. That's right.
I don't recall if there were waivers granted back then.
I can, and there weren't.
I'm sorry?
I can recall, and there weren't waivers given. The waivers came in about a year or so later.
Okay, if you say so.
So what happened was that you and the Davises had to come up with another solution, and you did an excellent solution, which was you built a downgrade drain, which went off the property under Cumberland, and then has been described later. What's stopping you doing that now?
That drain was existing. We didn't design a new drain.
The drain was nothing like existing. There was a tiny drain. You had to pull up much of their front.
That's not correct.
You had to put up much of our front as well because we shared the drain with them, and so it had to be done. It was a big project, but they did it because there was no option but to do it, given that no waivers were then permitted.
The drain was existing.
The drain was tiny. I repeat, you had to build a new drain, basically. It wasn't just a question of, topping it up a little bit. You had to take out the existing drain and put a whole new drain in. I have photographs of the process, if you want.
I'm sorry, you have what?
I have photographs of the process. We were next door. We were fascinated. Also a chunk of our driveway, a chunk of our drive from the back of our house right through to the street had to come up as well to put the new drain down. I'm right about this. What I'm asking is why this can't be done on this property.
Because the infrastructure was already there on that property. We did not have to obtain a county or town permit to connect to an existing storm drain system. The infrastructure was already there. We increased some pipe sizes, but the outgoing pipe that ran under Cumberland Avenue was already in place.
But it's in place now, isn't it, too? I mean, it hasn't gone away. The pipe on the Cumberland Avenue is still there. It could be connected to.
I assume it could be connected to, would require a permit.
Okay, so get a permit. What's the problem? You can get instead of having to come up with all these devices to somehow try to keep the water on site through various means, you can actually get the water off site by doing what you did when you're designing 4515, the drain for 4515. That's perfectly possible, isn't it?
I haven't studied that. I can't tell you for certain if it all works. I don't know.
Would you like to study it?
Would I like to study it?
Yes, if we could get Mr. Keating to agree to have a look at it, you could do that.
Well, you could ask your question, John, to Mr. Kehoe, who's representing the partnership, the applicant.
Mr. Kehoe, you could do that, couldn't you?
take a look at the drainage at 4515?
Take a look at whether you can do for the drainage under 4519, what Cass Engineering had to do for the drainage under 4515 and also under 4513, which is to put a bigger pipe down to join the existing Cumberland Avenue system. You could do that, couldn't you?
Potentially, that really changes everything about that plan. I know that that pipe from 4515 goes under the street there and then to the tennis courts there. So that would be an enormous cost on our end.
So, well, the cost of the project.
Would require approval by the town to allow us to do work in the right of way. Possibly the removal of many street trees to get from 4519 to 4515, or private easements over adjacent properties. Not to mention the numerous utility crossings that would have to be accounted for in getting a pipe from upstream to downstream. So it's would be quite an extensive study to figure out if all that can work.
But it could be figured out, and the town could grant you the necessary permissions to do that work.
That is correct.
And the town might decide in its wisdom to see if it could go that route rather than having this enormous jumble of things which will more or less keep water on site, which you won't. We now found out thanks to Shannon.
That's correct.
I repeat, this was a solvable problem for 4515. It was a hideous problem for them and for us upstream at 4513.
I don't know for sure if it's a solvable problem, but it's something that could be studied.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to do.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. John Barry. Mr. Town Manager, who is next?
Kathy Picard.
Councilwoman Picard.
Thank you. I just a couple of questions. I know that the county says you cannot in any way impede the water that's flowing down, that's already flowing onto the property. It just has to keep going, but you can redirect it. Can direct it, and I would think you could direct it in a way that just makes sure that it's not going to go onto a neighbor's property. And in fact, Cass Engineering, many years ago, you all did this for me. We created a swale. We are at the bottom, toward the bottom of Dorset, and I think I sent pictures to the council. I hope they saw it. And that swale directs the water such that it doesn't flood our next door neighbors whose house was built, they didn't realize it at the time, into the path of that water. So it can be redirected. And so I don't know if that has been considered. You know, it can be redirected with swales, and it could be redirected to across the street to go eventually into that drain. Ours, there's no way that all the water we get can be kept on site. And there's no question that the clay nature of our soils, it doesn't percolate in that easily. But I also had a question, if you're redirecting it, can you do a major dig and put in a real biomaterial, that mixture of sand, topsoil, and leaf grow down to 8 feet, and it will absorb a fair amount of water on the property. So my question is, what if the county had not given the waiver? What would you have to have done? And I think that's the question we all need to be asking ourselves. We do need, somebody said precedent. We do need to start establishing a precedent certainly with every new house. And then eventually with education, we hope we can get something done with everyone. The Stormwater Committee is looking at that. But this is a serious issue. And
so Councilor Picard, who specifically is your question to?
Okay, the builder, can you create any kind of swale? Is there enough room that would direct the water and keep it going away from the neighbors? And, you know, at some point, folks, we just have to be good neighbors. Yeah, if it costs the builder extra money, you just have to be a good neighbor.
There is really no swale that we could put in there that's going to mitigate 2 acres of water flow.
I know, well, there is. We have more than 2 acres. You can do it. And it wouldn't mean you're going to absorb it on your property. You're just directing it away from the neighbors. And if that's the case, if what you're saying, there's no way, then where's that water going to go? It's just going to go right on into the neighbor's property. But now you're doing a new build. We can help the neighbors. You can create. So,
and so my argument to you would be that we are trying to help the neighbors, and we are making a distinguished effort to put these attenuation devices to improve the existing conditions.
yeah, I don't understand really why the county doesn't accept those. And the whole process is, and then I'll leave it, but it's backwards, because you need to look and see what you would need to do on that size lot if you were not granted a waiver. And then you start the design. Okay, on my lot's huge. I could have a huge house, but this lot isn't as big. And that's where I think the council and the town has to start rethinking things. But anyway, it would be nice, Mr. Keogh, if you all could take a look at that and figure out a way to at least direct it away from the neighbors. And I know it's not environmentally good, but I don't care if it goes onto the street at this point. It won't have to travel too far to get to a storm drain. But you can't do this to your neighbors. That's it. I'm finished.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Picard. Mr. Town Manager, who's next?
The next person was Gail Horn.
Hi, I'm Gail Horn. I own the house at 4521, so the slightly upstream home, as well as live on Surrey. And I think the concern that Councilmember Picard raised is the one that is sort of frustrating to me. I can't remember which council member asked the builder, what are the measures you can do on the property to address the runoff problem? And I was happy to hear that they're going to put in this device. I share some concerns that I don't understand why we're using a device that's not approved by the county for the very purpose for which we're planning to use it, but at least it's something from my perspective. But I guess if there's no space to do anything else on the property, I mean, isn't that the problem? I mean, is there any consideration to any design changes that might be made to the plans to enable the builder to put some of these approved mitigation measures like the rain garden, or I missed the name of the other one, or what Ms. Carr just said about swales? I mean, has there been any consideration whatsoever to making any design modifications within reason? We still want you to build what you want to build, so that you can be a good neighbor and that you can contain the water using devices that are actually, or measures that are approved by the county and that don't require such a substantial waiver for stormwater management. So I guess that's a question to the builder. I mean, apart from these 2 non-approved mitigation devices, have you considered doing anything or making any design modifications whatsoever to account for the water, or to create some more space to put additional mitigation devices onto the property?
We want to keep the design the way it is, but we're getting caught up, I feel like, on the attenuation device not being approved by the county, and it's solely not approved by the county because it changes the direction of the water. It captures water that's going over the lot and disperses it, and the county states that you're not allowed to do that. These attenuation tanks are essentially very similar to the drywall tanks that are approved by the county. The attenuation tank is a combination of rain tanks with gravel on top, and those rain tanks fill up, disperse the water, and then the water flows over top of the gravel when they are full. We have looked into, sorry.
No, go ahead.
We have looked into other ways, but this is the most manageable way. I mean, we can't solve the issue of those 2 acres of water coming across our lot. That's always going to be there. That was there before we bought the property. However, we're making an effort to improve the property as it stands, and in doing those 2 attenuation devices, although they're not approved by the county because the county does not allow us to capture flowing water on our property, they are still going to mitigate the water that our lot sees and then the water that 4517 sees.
Well, I guess what I don't understand is I thought you said earlier that there were 2 reasons they weren't approved. One was that it combats the flow of the water, but the second was that it was actually too close to the property line.
I
which
believe
again-
I spoke on the too close to the property line.
Okay. And so, and I just want to make sure I'm hearing you clearly. You are not willing at this stage, even understanding all of the water problems that exist on Cumberland and have predate your purchasing this property, admittedly, you are not willing to make a single design change to the plans. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
We are not willing to redesign with 2-car garage up front. We have already got our plans approved by the county, and we have a lot of interest on this property already, and we are ready to keep going. We have met the county requirements, and we have done more improvements on top of the county requirements to please the neighbors and as well as mitigate that water. I mean, we have met with our neighbors multiple times and discussed this via email and trying to reason with them and answer their questions. However, that water is always going to flow from the high point to the low point.
But I don't.
Let me interject here. Can I interject? Because
Yes,
my
go
name is
ahead,
Brian
because,
Riley.
Ms. Horn's
I need to
time
go
is
on the
expired. So thank you, please.
Yeah. So Brian Riley, I need to go on the record. 4521. I understand the water probably.
Well, hold on, Mr. Rowley. You're out of order. You'll have a chance to speak. So, Ms. Horn, your time has expired. Did you?
No, it's fine. I mean, that's my husband. So I was going to see
I
what
understand. I understand, but you're on different Zoom, so he'll have a chance. So was your last question answered by the applicant?
No, my questions has not really been answered, but at this point, I feel like we're beating a dead horse, and it's been articulated. They're essentially unwilling to make any design modifications to accommodate the fact that they've bought a property that has some significant water issues, not only for the property itself, but for their, I mean, I don't know if we'll get any on 4521, but certainly for the downstream neighbors. And so I'm disappointed to hear that that is the case, but I will cede my time to all the other.
Thank you for your testimony tonight. Is Dr. Riley next, Mr. Town Manager? Or
Yes.
Why don't we go to Dr. Riley?
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor Slavin. I'm going to be succinct. And John addressed it earlier.
You have 4 minutes.
Okay, I've got 4 minutes. John addressed this point earlier, 4517, and the school, which did a marvelous job with the field, addressed the water situation by rechanneling it with a drainage system, a simple drainage system that brings it into the sewer system. So the attenuation devices are great and all, but if we could direct the water, similar to the swales, but direct the water through a pipe system or some sort of underground channel system, this is dealt with all the time. So my question to CAS Engineering is, what can be done to direct the water similar to 4517 and similar to what was done up at the school, where the water is not just simply contained or dispersed or redirected, it's sort of captured and then brought to the street. I mean, that's essentially the way to prevent the problem. Allow the builder to have what he wants, which he can, but to have some sort of French type drainage system, which a lot of houses have, or a swale, I guess, or an underground pipe that directs the water towards the street, as opposed to having it flow from high to low off the back of the property. I mean, we recognize that there is essentially increased storm systems, scientifically proven through global warming. Drummond is dumping more water onto our property lines. I mean, this is a huge issue for Little Cumberland. All of the properties there, the build will flood if they don't put the water towards the street and towards the sewage system.
Well, thank you. And you're asking for the applicant to respond?
I'm asking the engineer, the cast engineer who brushed aside John's question. There's a pipe 4517 reconfigured their property to put in a storm drain, a much larger one. I have pictures too. I mean, yes, that already hooks up to a system that goes underneath the tennis courts. But it seems to me that there could be a way to hook up a drainage system that moves a lot of the water towards to a drain near the sewer system towards Cumberland. Has that been studied? What can be done about that? What sort of possibilities are there?
Okay.
Similar to what is done.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. Mr. Robertson, can you respond, please?
Sure. So it has not been studied. There are some hurdles to overcome, if you will, in that type of undertaking. Number one, the backyard of the subject property is about 3 feet lower in elevation than the street. So that's one reason why the swale concept doesn't work here. We can't swale water from the back to the front because the front's higher. The same challenges hold with collecting the water in the back in a pipe and piping it to the front. That pipe obviously would go, while the pipe wouldn't be uphill, it would buck grade. Pipe would flow downhill, but it would still have to connect to what I believe is a fairly shallow system at 4515. So I'm not certain, I can't tell you tonight whether or not it's even possible to put a drain in the backyard of 4519 and pipe it to 4515. If that were possible, the shortest route to doing that would be across 4517, across the backyard of 4517 to the drain between 4517 and 4519. That would require an easement, would require obviously permission from all property owners to partake in that effort. There's a big tree in the back of 4517 that would certainly be impacted by any type of storm drainage pipe. And lastly, the system would all have to be reviewed and approved by Montgomery County, because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that it is their system.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Riley, your time is up, but did you want to ask a brief follow-up?
No, thank you. That was helpful. I appreciate that response. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Town Manager, who's next?
Is Carter Davis still here? Appears not. So
actually, we're here, but our question was answered.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you for attending. Who's next?
What about Ginny Bigger? Is Ginny still here?
So may I ask I noted that Ginny Bigger, who lives on Cumberland, did put some comments in the chat. Mr. Town Attorney, is that part of the official record? Is the chat part of the official record?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, we could go ahead and read that so that it would be part of the record, because I don't know that the recording will keep the chat messages.
So
Matt, do you know if the chat messages will be stored?
I don't know off the top of my head
Okay,
either.
so why don't we have, I see that Ms. Bigger wrote at 6:59. Mr. Town Manager, can you read that into the record?
Yes, Ms. Bigger said, I echo concerns of my Cumberland neighbors. It seems the plan for the property makes a known problem significantly worse. The builder hasn't answered the biggest concerns expressed, except to say they can't solve them. It's not in the best interest of the closest neighbors and is in fact quite harmful.
Okay, thank you. Who is the next resident or guest?
Shelley Guiley.
Good evening.
Hi there, sorry about that.
Yeah, hi. Oh, the video's not on? How do I? I'm a teacher. I should know how to turn that on.
Yes.
Oh, here we go. All right. So I'm standing here on a property.
Remember to identify.
This is Brett Guiley. She raised her hand on because we're using her Zoom.
And
it's me who has the question.
Get your street record.
All right, Brett Guiley. I'm at 4509 Cumberland Ave.
Thank you. Thank
right
you.
across the street from Town Hall.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Standing right now in a swale. That works. And it's on property that was raised above street level because I can't imagine our contractor did it out of the goodness of his heart. I imagine he was told to do it. Also, if you want to know how bad the water is that comes from Dorset, see those rocks back there? That's not a design choice. Shelley would never agree to that. That's because nothing else will stay in place because the water during a regular rain is so severe coming from Dorset, Drummond, whatever the heck that road is, Drummond, is so bad that it floods everything into our yard. So what was done, we raised the property, the builder did, we didn't build this. They were told, we've just heard earlier from this builder that they can't raise the property. Well, everyone else has been made to do so. I'm standing in a swale that works really well, that our builder was forced to do. It funnels the water on both sides. A little bit of water goes into our neighbor's yard. We're remedying that with the extension of our retaining wall, which is, by the way, if you don't do some kind of research on the flow of how water is going to come off your property, whoever buys this new house is going to have to deal with these issues afterwards to make sure the neighbors are not mad at them and do things such as spend an extra grand or two to put in place remedies that the builder couldn't foresee. So there's a lot of issues here, but my main thing is, why does this builder get off not having to raise the property like ours did? Because again, that's a big cost. That's a lot of property had to be put in here to raise this property up, to build in order to put this swale in, and in order to direct the water. As you can see,
if
that's water coming from not from our property, not from regular rain. That comes from behind us. That comes from Drummond, and they're getting it there from all directions. If sir, if I invite you to come to Shannon's house during a regular soft rain and watch the river of rain that comes through their backyard from your property, and then try to explain to me how everything you're doing is right and correct and meets all requirements. Because I go back to the prior comment of being good to your neighbors, and what's being implied here, what's being put in place here, does not meet any of those requirements. It's a disgrace. And I mean, all of us on Little Cumberland saw what happened that day last year when that rain occurred. And now every time we have a sprinkle, everyone panics. And what's being put in place on this property is going to make everything worse. And your claims that you can't do anything about water flow are ridiculous. Because I just pointed out, standing in my freaking swale, on my property that's been raised to above street level to afford that swale. And again, Carter of Carter Builds is not in the habit of doing things that will make his costs more. He's a longstanding builder who works with the town to make sure that things go well. And he did so here. And so if, by the way, if you guys are able to go through without having to do any of these remedial things to make sure your neighbors don't get flooded, my question to town would be, then why would we allow that to happen when the Davises have to spend so much effort going through to make remedies to make sure that their neighbors aren't impacted? And then why did Carter have to go through so many remedies here? And why do I have to continue to put money in to make sure that even the great things that are put in place in this property are remedied because some water still is going off over our property onto our neighbors? There's a lot of issues here that I have not heard any answers for whatsoever.
Okay, Brett, thank you very much for your testimony. Your time has expired, but I would like to ask I believe you were also wanting a response from the applicant. Is that right?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you. Could the applicant because I heard a question there. So could the applicant please respond to the?
Was the question why we cannot raise the lot? What?
Is that,
not just
is
to
that
deal
specific
with the
question?
water that's coming out there, but just saying that we can't do anything about water that comes from upstream is false.
They're saying
Because other builders have been forced to do so.
If we raise our lot 3 feet in order to flow it from the back of our lot to the front of our lot, then we would have an issue at 4521 where all that water is introduced to our lot. Every stormwater management plan is situational. I know that a swale works on your lot, and some of the different devices that you have in place work on your lot, but that doesn't mean that they're going to work on our lot. And we have not said that we are not willing to do anything in order to mitigate this water. We are just simply saying that there is a big issue of all that water that we do see on our lot, and we are addressing as much as we possibly can.
Okay, thank you. The time has expired. Mr. Town Manager, who's next?
Yes, the last folks who expressed an interest in making a comment were Ted Zegers and Susanna Goodman.
Thank you.
Hi, it's Ted Susanna. We are on 4518 Cumberland, so just diagonal from the property on the other side of the street. And I've got a fairly basic question. I think Mr. Robertson could probably give a one-word answer to. Right now, there is a fair amount of water that flows onto the property in question and flows through onto the Rovax property. If your plan is built as it is, would that result in more or less water being absorbed by your property and going onto the Rovax? In other words, is it making their problem worse or better?
I'm sorry, you were breaking up a little bit. Could you repeat that question again for me?
Yes, right now, a lot of water flows onto your property. Or not your property, but on the property that is trying to develop. Or to build a new, so take down the old home and build a new one. Right now, a lot of water flows onto that property. Some of that water, of course, is absorbed in the property. Some of it goes to neighboring properties. Under the plan, the amount of water would more water be absorbed by the property in question or less water be absorbed?
So, excuse me. So the calculations indicate when comparing existing to proposed conditions that there is no net increase of a 2-inch storm event. So I believe what's proposed is going to result in no increase in a 2-inch event. Pat and Tom have indicated that they will increase volume for the proposed attenuation device and build a second attenuation device. So, you know, I think these measures are go above and beyond and will help alleviate some of the downstream concerns.
Are you referring to the water that is coming down in the rain, or are you referring to the water that is absorbed by the property that now gets absorbed by the property rather than flowing onto the neighbors? It seems like if you're expanding the amount of impermeable surface by that much, it's just a matter of physics that more water flows onto the property. So, you know, I know you're talking about mitigating what would fall from the sky and you know, on the might be generated by the property by the new building, but I'm talking about what is currently flowing. With what you do, reduce the amount that is currently flowing from upstream, not falling down from the sky in a 2-inch storm, but just what is flowing from Drummond through. Would more or less of that water be absorbed by the project than is the case today?
I haven't studied the upstream, the drainage area to that effect. So I don't know how much of that upstream water is absorbed on those upstream properties. I don't know if any of those properties have any type of mitigation or attenuation or stormwater management device that may be helping to control their own water. I have no knowledge of any of that.
So you really have no idea whether this project would worsen the rollback circumstances or not?
This project looked solely at this property, is not going to create an increase from existing to proposed conditions over a 2-inch storm. That I know.
Okay, that doesn't sound like that's relevant to here. I mean, the real relevant question is the water that is currently flowing onto the property. And does more or less of that water get absorbed by the project? Now, if you don't know the answer to that, I don't understand what's going on here. I mean, it's the basic problem. Are you making there is a problem that exists. Are you making it worse? Are you making it better? And it sounds like you just haven't looked at the question.
I think we're making it better. I think there's no control there right now. And when the project's done, there will be control.
I know that the time has expired. Did you have one last, Ted, did you have one last thing you wanted to say?
Well, I believe the question has essentially been sidestepped, I think because they don't know the answer, it appears.
Okay, well, thank you for your testimony. And before I close the public comment period, I note that one additional person has written into the record, into the chat, Elizabeth Hurwood. I would like to ask the town manager to please read that into the record, and then we will close the public comment period.
Yes, and also Liza Julian is physically raising her hand in her camera. So I believe she's indicating that she
Okay,
would like
so
to
I will allow that one last time period, but in the meantime, would you please read Elizabeth Hurwitz's comments into the record?
Yes, Ms. Hurwitz asked,
it's 7:07.
So she had a couple of points. One is that the water from Cumberland goes alongside the tennis court and across the town hall parking lot into Dorset residence yards. And her second point was that this is a matter of precedent and of changing the town's orientation from accepting whatever the county does to requiring our own town needs to be met.
Okay, thank you. And as our last comment, thank you, Ms. Julian. You have the floor.
If the county doesn't deal with flood prevention, it's up to our town to help protect both current and future residents as best it can. Given the complexity of what we've heard tonight, I really strongly recommend still that there is some delay to consider what can be done. Would the county allow water to be piped under the street? Is it even a good idea? It's all complicated, and not all of this decision is up to us. Some of it's county matter. I am wondering, and this is a question for staff, in the past, has any permit been denied or delayed on the basis of stormwater management questions? Has it ever happened? And if it hasn't happened, why hasn't it happened? Or is approval essentially automatic? I realize this is not a question you may be able to answer.
I think that's a good question for the town attorney.
Thank you.
Town attorney.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not able to state whether a permit application has ever been denied or delayed based on a stormwater drainage concern. I don't recall it occurring off the top of my head, but it's not something I've researched, and I've only been representing the town for a few years. I can't say what transpired before my time.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Julian, did you have any other comments or questions?
I would think it might be a good idea to consider that and possibly follow up on what the implications are, because it seems to some of us that this is just an automatic approval and therefore somewhat meaningless. The Rovaks and others have raised some really serious concerns here. We're not trying to stop people from building things, but it shouldn't be at the cost of their neighbors.
Well, thank you. I'm sure the council will consider that, your opinion, when they deliberate and make their decision. So now this will conclude the public, excuse me. So now I'm concluding the public comment period. But before we close the hearing, the applicant now has the opportunity to present rebuttal testimony. That is testimony that has not been introduced previously and that directly responds to the public comments presented. Do you, Mr. Kehoe, have any rebuttal, anything you'd like to say in rebuttal to comments that have been presented?
Just that we are, again, improving the existing conditions, and that's all that we really can do. I mean, there's issues that are pre-existing. However, with the lot that we have, all we can do is address the issues on the lot and make them better. Our neighbors and everyone on Cumberland sees that there's clear drainage issues. However, it is our duty to do everything that we can for our lot and our lot only.
Okay, thank you very much. So this concludes the public portion of the hearing, and the record is now closed. And before the council discusses and deliberates on the findings of fact and conclusions of law, I am going to give the council another opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Council President Shaw. And Matt will unmute you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Kehoe, I've been listening to the testimony and I was looking at the drawing. I have it sitting here on the floor. I know you have a lot constructed on this lot. Do you have a landscaper yet? Sometimes at this point, the council gets a landscape plan at the same time, or at least not a detailed one, but sort of a general landscape plan before, while we're reviewing the application. And the reason I ask about that is several of the folks who have raised questions have asked about stormwater techniques. Like I have a conservation landscape in my front with swales. You don't have a lot of land on which to do something, but I'm hoping that you've selected a landscaper, or you're going to select a landscape person who could look at incorporating some of the design practices that help absorb water and direct it properly. Where are you on that issue? You're muted, Mr. Kehoe.
Oh, yeah, let Matt is gonna.
We have not hired a landscaper for this house yet. But when we do, we are more than happy to try and work with them in order to mitigate the water and use plants that will soak up a lot of water, as well as work with the town arborist in order to place trees back there that will take more water than something that they might offer in exchange. We would be happy to work with when we do pick our landscaper, to pick plants or sod that will take water at a better rate than just sodding that entire yard.
Right. I mean, really looking at, if not rain gardens, since you already have a pool, there are conservation landscapes where you can put in native plants, and you don't have to do the whole backyard, but you can do some of it to help better absorb water.
I think it would be very helpful along the top where our retaining wall is, above the retaining wall, because that is an area that we receive a lot of water from Drummond.
Mm-hmm.
And I discussed with Mr. Keating previously about the landscape plan for that top part. I know that we had discussed putting shrubbery in there. However, we could change that easily in order to use plants that will soak up more water.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on that, but there certainly are landscape companies who are. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Council Member Zuighauser. Do you have any last questions of the applicant?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Council Member Peel.
I do have a question for Mr. Kehoe, and maybe Mr. Robertson can help. I'm pretty interested in the various different ideas that people have brought forward about transferring some of the extra water that affects your property from uphill and transferring it to the street, essentially. That's something that I've always thought we should talk more about. I recognize it's not one of the county's priorities because they're trying to soak up the water and clean it through the water tables and so on. But I think there is a place for discussions about drains and pipes, and to the extent that there are some examples already on Little Cumberland and a sewer system in place, I guess I would be interested to know whether you and the Rovaks, could get together and talk about some kind of improvement along the back of the retaining wall, maybe across the back of their property that would eventually hook up into the storm drain at 4515. And again, I think this would be a project among neighbors, and I don't really know whether this would be a project that would be tied in with this particular building permit, but I think, I know that for the back of my property that we had, 6 neighbors where we had to rebuild a huge retaining wall, and it really was a group project, and, one that was done not in connection with any building permit, but that was done because all of the neighbors saw the need for it. And I don't like to sort of suggest additional expenses for the neighbors, especially when you're dealing with a flooded basement. But, if there's a long-term improvement that could be made across the back of the Rovaks yard that would alleviate the flooding that they get from Drummond, I think it would really be worth looking into. And I don't see that 4519 can manage all the water from Drummond. And I don't think anybody's really suggesting that, but to the extent that there can be a way to channel some of the drainage from Drummond away from both of the houses, I think it would really be worth looking into. And maybe you could, somehow have a commitment tonight to an ongoing discussion with them about how that could be worked into your landscaping and possibly also into your project from this point forward. And as for the 2 attenuation devices, I think that I appreciate your clarification that the county, in terms of the county's approval of them, that they're really just, it's a question of whether or not they're on their list in terms of stormwater management as devices that can be used for their purpose of cleaning the water. So I think, in fact, having those 2 tanks on the property, I think it will help, and I think it's certainly a good faith effort on the part of the builder in this case, and so I appreciate that. But I would like to hear, I guess, from Mr. Kehoe, whether you can see any area where you could come up with some landscaping solutions, whether it's swales or whether it's French drains or whether it's pipes, and even if it does involve going back to the county to ask for a connection permit, if that's something that you'd be willing to look into to take the pressure off of both of these properties.
Yes, that is something we would be willing to look into. And we had met the Rovaks out on site actually 2 or 3 weeks ago to discuss everything that was happening, to show them where we were putting that attenuation device in order to keep it away from their foundation and a little above where they're seeing all the water today. And we also told them a couple things that they might want to do on their lot in order to help prevent any more flooding of their basement. For example, the drain pipe that the 15-inch drain pipe, it is easily filled with debris. We talked about putting something on there to filter out leaves so that water can flow through there. And then they also do not have a sump pump, which does not help getting water out of that house and the basement and the surrounding area, as well as the grade of the entire property is graded towards their basement. In those enormous rain events, unless they do something to their property, and I understand that it's a give and take on both of our ends, unless they do something to their property in those enormous rain events, that issue will occur again. Regardless of if we
It
built
seems to me that the existing property, you know, I can't tell from the drawings, but it looks like to me like there's a pretty big backyard, possibly just with grass. And, you know, I think we all know from living in Somerset that when you just have sort of old grass on the clay soil, it's really hard for water to absorb, even though it looks like it's supposed to absorb because it's a lawn. But I know that, you know, in my backyard, I have the same issue. You can see pools of water, and it takes a while to soak in, especially if you don't have, you know, aerated soil and so on, which, you know, I don't. But, you know, I think that if the lawn that's back there now has no water management devices on it at all, I'm not surprised to learn that the water is essentially flowing straight across the existing 4519 yard and into the 4517 yard. It makes sense to me that that's what would happen. So I would hope that by improving the property and by putting 4 dry wells and 2 attenuation devices onto the property, in addition to the swimming pool, which, you know, will stop some water from running off of that area, you know, and the landscaping and the trees, that, you know, it seems to me that there's an opportunity to make things better. And certainly both Mr. Lohmeyer and Mr. Kehoe and Mr. Robertson have explained that the attenuation devices will help to manage the drainage. So I guess I'm hoping, I don't know whether, you know, at this point to put this into a building permit condition, but I certainly hear a commitment from, I know this is not the right moment for that, but I'm just saying that I hear a commitment from Mr. Kehoe that he and Mr. Keating will continue to work with the neighbors on, you know, on new ideas for how to manage the water that comes down from Drummond in particular, so that it doesn't flood the backyards of both of these properties. And so,
well, when you'll have an opportunity to discuss that when you begin
I
to
guess I don't have any more questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Council Member Circo, do you have any questions of the applicant?
No further questions. I appreciate their engagement with the neighbors.
Thank you. Council Member Barr. Yeah, hold on. You need to be unmuted by the town manager.
Okay, one question, but it needs a little bit of background. I think as you've been developing your plans for this, you've become acquainted with the neighbors prior to this meeting, and you've learned that there is extremely great concern, and in fact, high anxiety on Little Cumberland about stormwater runoff. You have already responded to that even after the county gave you a permit, because you put in one attenuation device into your plan already, and you're saying you're putting a second attenuation device in, so you are already responding to the neighbors. My question is, after you've heard the intensity of the feeling tonight and all of the remarks of the different neighbors, do you want to go any further now?
So when does it become enough? Because the first attenuation device wasn't enough. The second attenuation device wasn't enough. We're going to take efforts with the arborists and landscapers to use plants that will soak more water. It just, when does it become enough? And it's not only our issue to deal with.
So that's your answer then, that you think that is all that you are going to do, right?
That the 2 attenuation devices, landscaping plan, as well as the working with the arborist.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So council, usually at this point, I I ask for if anyone is prepared to make a motion. But what I would like to do before that is to ask the town attorney to sort of frame or describe what this decision is all about, I guess.
Sure, Mr. Mayor,
So
and
that everybody understands what the council is doing now and what tools they have. And
sure, and if the council wishes, the council can engage in deliberation before a motion is entertained. And the council's task is to decide whether a permit can be issued according to the permit criteria in the town code. And I mean, would you like me to read the permit criteria?
well, let me ask what I was thinking of doing was asking the town manager to open up all the council members' audios so that they can deliberate, discuss, and perhaps come up with a motion. But it's the pleasure of the council what more information they would want from you. So I'll defer to the council president, the leader of the council.
I think Ron's suggestion that he go through the criteria was a good one. So I think that's a nice starting place.
Okay, so the town code section 112-9 provides that the town council shall consider in approving or disapproving an application for a building permit such factors as A, whether the application is complete and conforms to the requirements of this part 1, whether the proposed work complies with the provisions of Chapter 8 entitled Buildings of the Montgomery County Code incorporated into this part 1, whether the proposed work complies with all applicable subdivision and zoning requirements, whether the proposed work complies with all other applicable town ordinances, including Chapter 182 trees of the town code, county, state, and federal laws, whether the proposed work unduly and adversely affects the health and safety of adjoining or confronting property owners and residents, or the enjoyment of their property. And finally, F, whether the proposed work otherwise unduly and adversely affects the public health, safety, and general welfare of the town or its property. And with respect to the substantive code requirements, included in the record is the building permit administrator's permit review checklist reflecting whether the permit application conforms to the substantive town requirements. And that's item 3C in your package.
So is anyone prepared to make a motion, and or do you wish to ask the town attorney to assist in that? And or do you wish that we open up all of the audio so you can deliberate? I think open that up anyway, Mr. Town Manager. So unmute all of the council members so they can deliberate and ask questions of each other or the town attorney but I would ask first if anyone is prepared to make a motion.
I think I'd like the opportunity to deliberate a little bit with the council here before I'd be ready to make a motion. I mean, I don't know if we want to go in order, Marnie, it's up to you.
I'm fine with anyone speaking up. So if you wanted to start the ball rolling, Franny, you're welcome, or anybody else.
I think Councilor Circo isn't unmuted.
Okay.
I am now, sorry.
Okay, good.
Okay. We've been in this situation before. And I guess I have to remind myself whenever whenever we're faced with a building permit like this, so we need to follow the rules that are in place that are the ones that the that Mr. Keating and his company looked at when they invested in this property in the first instance. And, you know, although we have many good reasons that we've been talking about for several years now and that have just been emphasized tonight, we have many good reasons to really consider changing our code to bring stormwater management, you know, under the purview of the town council. You know, at the moment, as my fellow council members know, that's not the case. And the applicant has provided evidence that they have passed the county's stormwater management review. And then, of course, the topic of stormwater, in my mind, frequently is conflated with drainage, and understandably so, but and we do have a drainage plan, which is separate from the stormwater management plan. And I think we've heard some new ideas tonight from the builder as to how to manage some of the drainage issues that could be anticipated to come about as a result of this proposed development. And, you know, I know in the past when we've had applicants who've come in with waivers from the county, you know, it's clear, you know, that they'll say, you know, there's clay soil, or the topography of the lot doesn't permit, you know, more dry wells or rain gardens to be put into place. And, you know, not every lot is going to be sort of flat and amenable to some of these mitigation measures. And certainly it sounds like Little Cumberland as a whole has a lot of trouble based on its topography. And, you know, I guess in my view, I think it would be unfair to put the burden of solving the drainage issues onto one resident or one applicant in this case. You know, this issue could easily be brought up by a resident who is renovating a house or doing a tear down on their own. I understand the distinction being made by people on the call tonight by, you know, the fact that it's a developer with a profit motive, but I think that that's something that could be, you know, attributed to anybody who is doing an improvement to their house. And so, you know, it does make it a step removed. And of course, there will be a new neighbor for the Rovaks. And I hope that that neighbor will be somebody who is a good neighbor. Anyway, I guess just in terms of the council deliberating, you know, I think, you know, we've talked among ourselves about these issues before, and we've worked on them in work sessions, and we're working with the Stormwater Management Committee on how to manage this going forward. And, you know, and yet, you know, we have a case in front of us tonight where we need to apply the code and apply the law. So I'd be interested to hear what other people on the council have to say.
Well, one thing I would like, oh, I'm sorry. Were you going to speak, Steve?
Oh, please proceed.
Please go ahead.
Well, so that was a good summary of sort of where we're at today. But I'd like to pull some of those threads that Franny raised. And she talked about how it would be, or what I heard was something to the effect of be unfair to put the responsibility of solving this on one individual, on the developer. And it could be anyone in the town doing a project. But I would argue strongly that it's equally unfair to put the burden on the neighbors of this effort, the neighbors of this project, whom we've heard from, numerous residents will be adversely affected by this project. And I think as we look at it, we should, or at least the way I'm looking at it, and everyone may look at it from their own perspective, but I'm looking at it from a question of, is this the only thing that can be done? You know, and Franny is correct. Some lots have issues with clay soil or whatever that impact the ability. But from my perspective, this is a massively overbuilt lot. The design, over 50% of the lot's going to be impermeable surface. I don't need to go through all the data. It's a lot. And it's no wonder that when the county in their process says, well, you can't capture all that water. Well, it's because the lot is overbuilt. And I think that's exactly where our town code that we can apply comes into play, where we can consider the health, the safety, and the enjoyment of our residents and how they're affected by a criteria. It's an explicit criteria. And to make a slightly dramatic analogy, if the assault in the Capitol was not an impeachable offense, then this house is, I guess, a great house as is, and we shouldn't bother with it. But
Well, Steve, can I just go back to what you were saying earlier about sort of the, unduly impacting the, I think the trouble with this is that we don't have that evidence in front of us right now from our experts, from the applicant. We don't have, what we have in front of us is evidence that the current conditions are terrible for the neighbor. I've heard that. I hear it loud and clear. The current conditions, the storm that happened in September was a disaster. And that was true at my house too. I had to put a sump pump in. We were all affected. It's clear that we have a bad, storm situation happening. What I don't hear, and I'm trying to be really careful about this here, I don't see the evidence in front of the council tonight about what's going to happen when this structure is built out, other than the evidence that's in the drawings in front of us that show the grade, that show the flow of the water, that show where the dry wells are, that show where the attenuation tanks are. And I don't have more than that, other than to say that the existing conditions are bad and there's some proposed improvements that will manage some water and possibly even help with the downhill flow coming from Drummond. And beyond that, I don't know how we can point to with certainty to say, doing this project, which is within the permitted scale and scope of the county and town. I mean, we're not talking about waivers here. We're not talking about building to the inch. And as we've seen in the past, we all know
that's true.
This project is within the right size for the lot, and and some of the things that might be in some lots where you could say, look, this would be a great opportunity for permeable pavers in the driveway. And what do you know? Yes, it'll work. It would be nice if that worked. And I think, I've heard the evidence as to why it won't work for this particular property. What I haven't heard is anything more than, understandable anxiety about what the change will bring. And yet what I also have heard is that the existing conditions are very bad. And, I guess I'm curious to know why you feel so certain that it will be bad. I mean, I honestly am asking that. I mean, genuinely.
Fair question.
What?
Great question. And I appreciate the way you're asking it. You're right, it is hard to forecast the future. The data point I'm referring to is the stormwater waiver that the applicant secured. And the what I heard being explained to me is that the justification for them getting the waiver, in essence, is that the house is so large in that lot that they can't contain all the runoff from all of the impermeable surfaces on that lot. So to me, that's just too big a house for that lot. It might not be pushing up against, it's not, and you're right, it's not coming up to a tenth of a foot of the setback requirements, which we've seen on quite a few projects.
Yeah.
It's the runoff. And I think what exacerbates it in this case, perhaps more than some others we've looked at, is the pre-existing conditions. So I just think that combination is untenable for the neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Robin came up with a great idea for a potential redesign, and obviously that would require time, effort, and that translates into money for the applicant. So I'm certainly not saying that that is the solution, but I think it's an example of how there are other things that could be done on that lot that would produce a fabulous home, good return on the investment, but would not, that doesn't take the easy way out with the stormwater waiver.
One of the things that I was struck by was the report, the town's report on the existing conditions and how the one attenuator would in fact make things basically not any more water than before from the existing conditions, and that the second attenuator would in fact make it less, which I think is the offer of the second attenuator does really help. To address your other point, Steve, you know, if I were designing this, I probably wouldn't put that much on a lot either. But all of what's proposed is, as you point out, legal. You know, I always wonder why people want to build swimming pools when the town has a very nice swimming pool, and that could take away a lot of impervious surface. But you know, people make choices about what they want to put on land, and there are parameters for what they can do. And as far as I know, this is basically within the parameters. I think the builder has shown some willingness to continue to add things that would improve the existing conditions with these attenuators. And I also think there was some willingness to consider landscaping that could reduce water runoff, and a willingness to work with our arborist about trees that could also help with water runoff. It's not perfect, for sure. We've heard tonight that there are huge issues of water coming onto Little Cumberland, principally from Drummond and then coming sort of downhill. It's hard for me to see how one property would be able to solve that series of problems.
Right. I'll say a couple of things. Our job tonight really is to consider the application as submitted. And I did make the suggestion for what I think is an improved design. I'm modest. But the point is, it is exactly that. It is a suggestion only. And it's not a part really of the hearing. It's, if you want to think about it, go ahead and think about it. But no, the hearing is to approve or not the application that you have submitted. Now, I've heard a couple of things that I like. One is that you're putting in a second attenuation device, and the second thing is, the other thing is that you are putting in landscaping and hope to put in landscaping that will also further absorb water. I don't want to approve the plan as submitted because I've only got a verbal commitment to these. What I want to approve is the revised plan that shows the second attenuation device along with all the other devices and shows where you're going to put the landscaping. I realize that you're not there yet, but I think that's necessary in order to actually give you a final permit. I'll stop there.
I think that makes sense, Robin. Sometimes when we get changes to building permits that are proposed sort of, you know, live, you know, sometimes we do, and we can talk about this, sometimes we do a conditional permit that, you know, then we then require a new set of plans and so on. And sometimes we say, you know, please come back for a special meeting where you can bring back the plans. And in some cases, if you have to go back to Montgomery County, we say, you know, you have to go back to the county and bring the whole thing back to us when, you know, when you've got the county permit. So there are a variety of options here. I understand that you would like to see that in the plan. I have to say, I agree with you. I think that's an important element here tonight. And I also think that it would be useful, you know, at this point, we've had, you know, 3 hours well, almost 3 hours talking about this. And I think it'd be useful for Mr. Kehoe to, and Mr. Keating to go back and look and see if there are any other ideas. You know, maybe there is a pipe that could be put into place that would need to be put on the plans. And if that was a pipe or French drains or something that would, like I said, reduce the pressure on the neighbors.
So are you asking? So
I'm just, at the moment, I'm just deliberating with my fellow council members.
okay, good. Right.
Thank you.
Because I wanted to.
I know you're trying to move it along. I think we've
No,
all put a lot of effort.
I'm not trying to move it along, but I
do think we've all put a lot of thought into this tonight, and I don't want to cut it short because I don't think that would be fair to the people who've been participating. But
could I just put a feeler out? If we propose it as a conditional permit, do we want to have the applicant come back with us to explain the revised plan, or do we accept that they're going to revise the plan and we leave it to the mayor and the town manager to review the plan and decide it's okay?
I would much prefer to, Robin, I think that's an excellent comment, and I would much prefer to do it that way. I think.
Sorry, which way?
Robin's way, so that.
He had two ways.
Oh, well, so that I'm sorry, so that they don't have to come back to us, that the town manager would be able to approve it. I think that we've put in a lot of time, a lot of effort into this. Based on my understanding from the legal advice that we received from our lawyer, I think we would be wise to approve of the plan. It meets all the requirements that's set forth in our code and everything else. And the builder has really been trying to work with us tonight. And as I don't need to repeat it, they've made some real accommodations. So I'd like to take one of Robin's suggestions, move forward with the plan, putting in the second device, showing the landscape plan, I guess, to Dr. Feather, and allowing our town manager to approve it with those accommodations.
I think just to follow,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
just to be specific about what we're talking about with respect to the landscaping, just so we're all on the same page understanding it. What I would be looking for on the landscape plan is the actual location of the trees, and maybe even specificity from Dr. Feather and the builder as to what types of trees are going in addition to things like bushes or, rock gardens or whatever else you can come up with that could stop the water from flowing onto 4517.
I heard Mr. Keating.
Yeah. Okay.
Acknowledge that when he was here, that he was very interested in talking with Dr. Feather about the appropriate trees and the appropriate tree placement. So we've already received that commitment from him.
Regarding the landscaper, usually I think at this point in the project, people don't have a final landscape plan, but I think the selection of a landscaper or a set of companies who are committed to the kind of design we're talking about, which is to prevent water runoff and to retain water on this property. That's more what we would be looking for, not what exact plants they would be, but sort of the one, or maybe you won't have selected the landscape firm yet, but maybe 2 or 3 that you might be choosing among the areas of the lot you would be looking at, of those kinds of things, not an exact plan.
Are we ready to come up with a motion?
So are you prepared to, so why
I
don't
have some notes if I can be helpful.
why don't one of you start, and then we will, as I always do, we'll ask the town attorney if the motion is legally and technically sufficient.
Okay, Franny, I'll let you walk into that one then.
Do this one, Robin?
Yeah. Oh.
Okay. I'm happy for you to do it, but I do have notes if I can be of help.
It's motion to approve the permit that's been submitted by Mr. Keating and Mr. Kehoe with the following conditions, that they submit a revised plan showing the second attenuation device along with the other treatments for stormwater on the property. And two, that they show the trees that they are going to plant, the specific trees that are in fact good at absorbing stormwater after discussion with Dr. Feather. These plans may be submitted for review to the town manager, and that's, if approved by the town manager, they do not need to come back to council. That's the motion.
Can I make some friendly amendments I have from my
Go
notes?
Yes.
Same amendment, it's you're framing it, then, so frame the motion, then the
These are just
town
things
attorney
that
will
Doug brought
refine
up
it.
earlier.
The town attorney will refine it, and then somebody will second, then you will discuss.
Okay, I just wanted to add to what Robin says, that as on the recommendation of Doug, that he also required a wall check and both height certificates for the main and accessory buildings. And I think you mentioned, but I had a note to myself to say canopy trees in back. I had another note asking for an infiltration test for the attenuation tanks. And I also had a note that they were going to add a 30% volume to the first planned attenuation device on the east side. And so I wanted to make sure that that happens as well.
Yeah, I think.
Well, yeah, and we also need to put in all these other things. The permits are for demolition, new construction, driveway apron, retaining wall, dumpster, HVAC unit, and tree removal.
Yes, and that sort of, I think was swept in with what Robin said about as presented by the applicant,
Okay.
but yes.
Well, yes, but you need
There's
to,
nothing in there yet, though, about landscapers. Neither one of you mentioned the landscaper, I don't think.
Are we asking that they hire a landscaper or that they have a landscaping plan?
What do you want us to say, Marnie?
I don't know that you want to ask for a specific landscaper.
No, I think maybe the kind of company they would hire.
I'm looking for a landscape plan. I'm less concerned with the kind of company. I want to see where the trees go.
Well, okay, but I'm interested, the landscape design for retaining waters, actually, though, some parts of the lot that will have certain kinds of plants and maybe even, swales or other things.
I mean, I guess I don't know whether the council's going to be involved in sort of cross-checking that or whether the town manager will be. And I wonder whether that's kind of, whether we have to put that on the landscaper now that they've heard kind of our concerns.
All right, how about I modify it to say when we're getting to the landscape piece, rather than talk about the trees only, to say that they do talk with Dr. Feather, but also that they show that they're recruiting a landscaper with stormwater expertise.
That makes me comfortable.
Okay, fine. That's good.
okay, so Mr. Town Attorney, take your time to come up with it.
Yeah, put it in English, please, Ron.
As everyone knows, it's vitally important that it's really a decision more than a motion. It's vitally important that it's totally specific so that we don't have to go back to minutes or somebody's recollection when there's an issue, and also to make it easy for the town manager to monitor and support this decision and implement the decision. So, Mr. Town Attorney, let me know when you're prepared to read the motion.
Oh, I wish you would have told me I had to do that in advance. I'm just kidding, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I know you're.
So, yeah, and I might add a couple items too from my notes. So the motion would be to approve the requested permit applications for the various items President Shaw noted, with the following conditions: that a height check and wall check survey be provided with respect to the main and accessory buildings, that 6 reforestation trees be planted, 2 evergreens, 2 canopies, and 2 ornamental trees. The canopy trees would be selected to be water-loving trees, for lack of a better adjective, that a $3,000 bond be posted to ensure compliance with the reforestation requirements. That the attenuation device at the back of the driveway in front of the detached garage be installed as represented, and that a second attenuation device be installed in the driveway as represented, that a revised plan be submitted showing the second attenuation device as described, that a landscape plan be submitted and be approved by the town manager in consultation with the town arborist, and that a landscaper with stormwater, I'm sorry, I forgot the word you used, Mr. Bart, with expertise in
Stormwater expertise.
be retained in order to help with the landscaping plan. Those are all the conditions I had, and I would just note that the last condition, I'm concerned about what exactly is being required. So, is it just required that the applicant consult with a landscaper? Or is the town requiring as a condition of the permit that landscaping measures be implemented to help with water drainage? And if the latter is true, then I think we need some specificity to avoid confusion in the
The
future.
latter would be true for me.
Me too.
And I do think, while I don't have specific landscaping ideas in mind, I think that we could condition this permit on a landscape plan coming back to the town manager and to the town council, that show, in addition to the new plans that have to come back to us.
Mhm.
And I would like them to come back to the council. I guess I know Barbara said to come back to the town manager. I would like them to come back to the council. I think it's important that we circle back on this, and I would like that to include the landscape plan that includes not only the location of the trees
Mhm.
and any other plants, but also explanations that can connect the dots for us as to how the landscape plan can contribute to the cause here.
So
If that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, the demolition permit could be granted, and
Yeah.
another hearing could take place on the limited issue of approval of the landscape plan.
And delivery of the revised application that shows the attenuation tanks.
Right, because technically a landscape plan is required if 3 or more trees are being proposed for removal.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I don't know if that messed up your motion, but
Did that add the language? You might want to read that language that you asked the question about.
So at this point, the motion would be to grant the demolition permit application and to require a continued hearing for the limited purpose of reviewing the sufficiency of the landscape plan. And at that second hearing, then the motion could be to grant the other permit requests with the conditions we've already discussed, which would not be conditions of the demolition permit granted tonight.
but are those also conditions of the building permit then? Because
Well, the building permit would not be granted tonight.
so is the
The
building.
building permit, the tree removal permit, the driveway apron permit would be granted at a continued hearing following approval of the landscape plan.
Franny, I really think that that's holding things up in a big way for.
Well, okay, here, I guess what I wanted to say,
tonight.
I feel like we've held a very substantive hearing on the building permit. What I'm looking for is a delivery from the end of the revised plans as opposed to a new hearing. And maybe it's just a question of the council receiving those from the town manager. I'm not sure what the process would be.
Well, sure. I mean, the problem is the council can grant a permit with conditions, but can't grant a conditional approval. In other words, you need to have findings of fact
right,
that justify whether or not the permit is issued tonight. And you can't leave it open for
that's what I'm getting
consideration. I mean, you can do that to some extent. You can say, you know, we require a tree planting plan approved by the town arborist for 6 trees. And so the arborist approves the location of those trees. But, you know, with respect to the landscaping plan for additional stormwater retention measures, I think we need some specificity. Otherwise, in the future, there may be a dispute as to, you know, what was required and whether that condition was actually met.
I understand.
So so then I'm pretty tired, Ron, so I apologize if you've answered this already. If we wanted to grant the permit with conditions, how would we change the language?
So you'd have to say, you know, you want or you require a landscaping plan that includes the following remedial measures. You know, a row of shrubs here, a pit of riprap there, which I don't think you're able to do.
No.
That's why I signaled.
What's your second recommendation, Ron?
So, you know, then to remove that condition if you're not able to provide specificity.
Well, the condition is that
or continue to
engage a landscaper with stormwater expertise, because that person can then review the lot in a way that we can't here. I mean, physically review the lot and then recommend, based upon their expertise, plants that will help absorb the water.
Sure, and that would be fine. But as I said before, then the condition is just to retain that person and not actually to implement anything.
That's what I started with. That's exactly
Okay.
it. And Franny, you know, I'm sorry, but that I think that's as far as we can go tonight.
I get it. Yep, I agree with you.
All right.
Yep.
So,
I understand.
so are you clear on that part now, Mr. Town
We lost
Attorney?
Ron.
I think Ron is
We may have lost Ron. He looks frozen to me.
So Franny, since Ron is frozen, where are we now? I'm struggling to follow this chain. What is your?
My understanding of where we are is that there's a proposal to grant the building permit and the other permits that go along with it to require the wall check, the height certificates for the main and accessory buildings, to require planting 6 trees, and to require the applicant to submit new building plans to the town that show the attenuation devices on them, and to require the applicant to engage a landscape firm with stormwater expertise.
That's everything that I have.
Can I second that?
No, we haven't had the town attorney. We need to get him back so that he can rule that the motion is legally and technically sufficient.
Okay.
So I think the town manager is calling him.
Okay.
I need to get my dog out pretty soon.
Yeah, what is, it looks like we have, according to the agenda, we have another hour, plus we moved the tax duplication to tonight, didn't we, Marnie?
Yeah, tax, but that, you guys, I have a revision to the,
Here he is. Here he is. Okay, Mr. Town Attorney. And I think he needs to be unmuted by Matt.
Sorry about that. I thought we were done.
No, no problem. So right
I'm
now,
just kidding, yeah.
no, we're not done. Right now,
wish.
right now, I am asking you to continue to rule on whether the motion is legally and technically sufficient.
It is, yes, with the most recent amendment of the final condition.
Okay, does the council wish him to read it again?
I'm okay.
Okay, I believe Councilmember Zoighauser seconded the motion. So now is there discussion?
Are we going to send it to Matt for clearance, or are we taking it back to council for review, which is the question we started with? Franny brought up the idea of taking it back to council. Ron said that would be difficult. We're going to accept now that it's just going to Matt for review.
That was my understanding.
All right, okay.
And thank you for the suggestion, Robin.
Is everybody clear on that?
Yes.
Okay, is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? I think Councilmember Circo voted no. Is that correct? It was 4-1.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. This concludes the public hearing. All parties who participated in the hearing will be notified of the written decision within 40 days. Is that?
Well, it won't take that long, Mr. Mayor, and the code no longer requires the 30-day holdover. So the decision will be issued as soon as I write it up. And
Yeah, I was going to ask you to please, because I know I had my script here, but could you describe so everybody understands what the process is now?
Sure, I will write a decision and I will email it to the council for reading and approving. And once it's approved, it'll be signed by the council president. And the decision is final once it's signed. And then it'll be issued to the applicant and to those who appeared and spoke tonight or who submitted comments.
Okay, thank you very much. Before we move on, and noting the time and the comment made by the council president, do you have a suggestion in terms of the rest of the agenda tonight? I do want to let the council know that later this week, we will be trying to schedule a brief meeting for the council to approve, to consider a request by Camp Somerset to contract with the town for use of the grounds this summer, and as was discussed at the work session. So, Council President Shaw, what is your suggestion in terms of the rest of the agenda tonight?
Well, I think we can approve the trees very quickly, and I think we can approve the amended tax duplication resolution very quickly. And I think we could have Matt's report at the, isn't our work session? Now, let's see.
We also have the building administrator's report, and is it your pleasure that we could have the town manager's report at the meeting for the Camp Somerset later this week?
Do the Camp Somerset the same night as the work session?
I was hoping to schedule the Camp Somerset at a noontime meeting later this week. And I don't think that it will be, I think that all of the issues that you and Councilmember Peel raised will have been addressed. So I don't think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be, so I would suggest that that the council hold a meeting to consider Camp Somerset and have the town manager's report and possibly the building administrator's report. Would that be your pleasure?
Jeffrey, did you see the note in the chat from Gail Horn? Did you see the note in the chat that?
Hi. We're not.
Are we going to work on that tonight?
The proposal by the council president is that we do the trees and the MML resolution.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure because we had a resident that wanted to talk about that.
But it's going to be, okay, let us continue. Council President Shaw, would it be your pleasure that we continue with item 6 and item 7, and that we then agree to schedule a meeting on perhaps Friday at noon for the other items? Is that all right with you?
I don't have those same numbers, but if you're talking about the tree planting plan and the MML agenda, that would be fine.
Okay, I assume that the council will defer to the council president. So with that, I will call the item public hearing motion and consider approval of the following proposed spring tree planting schedule as recommended by the town arborist.
Mr. Mayor, we still have our building administrator here, so I don't know if we can let him go or if you want to.
Let him go. Yes, we can let him go.
And do you need the attorney, Mr. Mayor?
Do you have another meeting?
I don't, but my mother's here visiting, and
oh yes, I don't.
And I was with you till 10:30 last night.
Thank you for your overtime.
All right, good night.
Overtime.
All right, bye now.
So thank you, everyone. So I call the item, Mr. Town Manager, I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, we still do have Tolbert here. Thank you, Tolbert. These trees, I think, went before the Parks and Natural Resources Committee, were approved for recommendation to the council. Tolbert, I will turn it over to you if you have any specific comments to make.
Okay, there's 10 trees proposed. 9 are street trees and 1 in Capella Park, south of the basketball court. And the resident at 5710, I think, raised an issue with the white oak. The only reason I'm planting that there now is the silver maple that's currently there is a very large tree. And that one's probably going to come down in maybe 2 or 3 years. So maybe the idea behind this was to get a tree started that would be there and established as the older tree was going to be removed.
What was the resident?
Hold on. Is that your report?
Yes.
Thank you. Council President Shaw, do you have any questions?
So Gail Horn says, I have an issue with a tree being removed on my property. So Dr. Feather, you're not talking about removing that tree, correct?
I think I discussed that with, I discussed that with the resident as they moved in. I think with her husband, that tree's not going to survive. Eventually, it's declining, and in 2 to 3 years, we're probably going to have to take it down. We're not going to take it down now. But this idea was to go ahead and plant a tree there and get it
start growing.
Yes,
yeah,
because this tree, the maple tree is not going to come back. It's going to go. It's going to continue to decline.
But we're not taking it down.
We're not taking it down now. No.
Okay, is that your only question? Thank you, Madam President. Councilmember Zeughauser.
No questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Peel.
No questions from me.
Thank you, Councilmember Circo.
No questions. Thanks for addressing that
Councilmember
resident
Barr.
question.
Thank you, Councilmember Barr.
No questions.
Thank you. Mr. Town Manager, has any resident or guest indicated they would like to speak?
Well, I think Gail and Brian are still here, so I don't know if they wanted to.
Doctor,
Briefly,
do you wish to speak? And he needs to be unmuted. There you go, Doctor.
Okay,
Welcome
good.
again. Welcome back.
Thank you. Very briefly, I want to keep that tree. You know, when we take these old trees and we send them out pasture, it's not a need in terms of the CO2 and the oxygen that they put out. Inch tree absorbs. So when we put these tiny little trees in, it takes 50, 70 years to get a big tree like that to soak up all the water from the front of my property. So I'm glad we're establishing the new tree. I like what Tolbert's doing. I do think at some point it may have to go. And then, of course, being the astute observer, I mean, we have a family of raccoons that live in that tree. I submitted pictures of it, and she recently gave birth long ago, and there are woodpeckers that live there. So it provides a lot of shelter and habitat, as well as the fact that it shades the street and allows us to mitigate the amount of air conditioning that we need to use. So it soaks up a lot of water. It provides a lot of good canopy for birds. I would like to establish the new tree. I don't want to cut this one down because I went to considerable expense when we were renovating the property with tree conservation and change the footprint of my driveway to keep the tree. Now, at some point when it becomes a hazard, I mean, then we can address it. But right now, I think the thing looks pretty sturdy unless we have, you know, hurricane type winds. And even then, I think it'll probably fall into the street.
Well, thank you, Dr. Riley. Dr. Feather, could you, again, for the record, respond?
We keep large mature trees as long as we can, as you said, until they become hazardous. And then of course we can't keep them. So this one is, I can't give you an exact time, but this tree, like you say, the woodpeckers are on it. There's raccoons in it, so there's hollows in it. So
I appreciate the 17 trees that you planted along the Cumberland property. I like them, but they still look like little wee ones.
Yeah, they're
barely 10, 15 feet tall. So it is appreciation of just how long it takes to get to these nice canopy of trees. And being, you know, arbor town, we need to respect this stuff. It takes a while, and it helps soak up a lot of the water that we get, and it helps soak up a lot of the water on my property. So that's all I have to say.
Okay.
Please, but just let me know before the chainsaws come.
Oh yeah,
I do want to make sure that
I'll discuss it with you before we decide to do anything.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Town Manager, has anyone else?
I just wanted to say.
Hold on, you'll get a chance.
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council, are you prepared to make a motion?
Yes, I am. That we approve of the proposed tree planting schedule as recommended by Dr. Feather on the current agenda.
Is there a second? I saw Shaw first. Is there discussion? Councilor Peel, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say that just for people who are listening in, you know, it's always been the practice of the council that if Tolbert says that a tree is hazardous, that's professional advice that we have to listen to. So when the time comes, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be something that we can debate, because once he says that, it's really a question of liability for the town. So, I mean, that's not today, but in the future.
I have a comment. I just want to bottle your energy and sell it around town if I could, because I'm so with you and I think it's wonderful. And when you have more time, I would hope you join the PNRC committee, because that's just such positive energy for this town. So thank you so much.
Okay, is there further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Oh, everyone voted yes, right? Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, our last item is public hearing motion to consider approval of the Montgomery chapter of the Maryland Montgomery Municipal League resolution. Well, it's the Montgomery chapter of the Maryland Municipal League resolution demanding fair tax duplication payments. Madam President.
The county council is in the budget season. The chapter, probably for those of you who've been around a while, tax duplication has been an issue for decades. This, you can read about the decade, it actually goes back to the 40s. There's a little history in the back, but I did want to amend one paragraph. Matt, did you send that paragraph around?
Yeah, the change that you had recommended was uploaded into the council packet in the Google Drive for you. So if you have that pulled up, you'll be looking along with the council president's edits.
Okay, so if you want to pull that up, so that's the only, so I would move that we.
No, we have to have questions.
Right.
So you presented, thank you. And let me just add that today was the monthly meeting of the Montgomery mayors, and I believe almost every mayor in the county is supporting this, and several are testifying tonight, so it's very timely. Council members, Zoe-Castro, do you have any questions?
No.
Thank you. Council Repeal.
No questions.
Thank you. Council Member Circo.
No.
Thank you. Council Member Barr.
No questions.
Mr. Town Manager, has any resident or guest indicated they wish to speak?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Council, are you prepared to make a motion?
I move that the council approve the resolution demanding fair tax duplication payments with the amended paragraph. And I also move that our town manager send this with a letter from the town of Somerset to the county council.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Matt. Councilor Zoe-Kaiser. Is there discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? All those opposed? And with that, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Passes. And so we will get back to you in terms of scheduling this brief further meeting later this week. Thank you for your time.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Good
work.
night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.